RE.
Okay, I will call to order the joint work session, Board of Commissioners and the Planning Board, November the 19th, 2024. Thank you guys for coming. I guess it looks like the whole board is here, is that right? Is anybody?
We're missing one.
Missing one. Well, appreciate you guys. I guess I counted you as that, because y'all got 7, right? Yes. Yeah. Well, thank y'all for coming out. Appreciate that. You know, the way we set up here is a little bit awkward. You're going to have, if you're going to be speaking and for people to hear outside, you know, on streaming and stuff, you have to kind of come up to the mic. So keep that in mind. Just come up here. But you guys are part of the meeting, so, you know, get involved if you want to, ask questions. Let's get some clarity, because that's one of the things I think, you know, setting this up, I know April worked with setting it up in Meredith, is we want to kind of get us on kind of the same mindset we can. Whatever confusion we have between the groups is kind of clear that up a little bit. So, so there's a couple things we're going to be, you know, talking about tonight, I guess. And but you guys, you know, I wish we had a little better setup where, you know, you don't have to get up, but you don't have to get up to kind of be involved. So appreciate that. We got some guests here, so we're going to get into the agenda already and move on. So is there any consideration to approve the agenda as written, or is there any additions or deletions we need to make? I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, I think that's unanimous. The first item we have is the UNC Rex presentation. I think Emily is here to do that. I know, I guess part of the presentation, you may update us on, I know you just went through some reviews and evaluations and stuff, and I haven't heard the results of that, so.
We won't until the spring, unfortunately.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
still
it's a
being
long-
considered.
It's a long process, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I got you.
Well, thank you
Welcome.
all for having me here today, Mayor and the Commissioners. I appreciate it. I will be very brief. Hopefully you have all heard about our plans, but I just want to make sure you knew the details and give you an opportunity to ask any questions you may have. So I am Emily Ziegler. I'm the Executive Director for Local Government Affairs for UNC Health. I also feel like this is coming back home for me. I am a graduate of Wake Forest Rolesville High School while we still had the Rolesville attached, if that ages me at all. So it's been fun to see the way this community has grown up around us over time. I'm here tonight on behalf of UNC Health and UNC Health Rex to share a little bit more about our growth plans in northern Wake County and to answer any questions you have. Next slide, please. So as you've hopefully heard, we have recently submitted 2 certificate of need applications for Wake County, and one of those is to build a new 50-bed community hospital in Wake Forest. We know that the northern Wake community has experienced incredible growth over the past decade, and that's only going to continue. We also know how important it is to have high-quality healthcare access close to home, and so we hope to be able to provide that here. Our proposed hospital would include 50 acute care beds, an emergency department, full-service emergency department, 2 operating rooms, 2 procedure rooms, 2 C-section rooms to support labor and delivery, as well as your supporting diagnostic equipment like X-ray, ultrasound, mobile MRI, and others, including lab, radiology, everything you would think of in a hospital here. It'd be very similar to our Holly Springs facility that we opened in November of 2021, if any of you have seen or been there. This hospital has performed exceptionally well. In 3 years, we've delivered over 2,000 babies. Our emergency department is constantly full. We are already building out our 7th floor to add more beds to that hospital. And what makes it even more successful is that it's so close to home for many of our patients. We've seen so many patients really appreciate that. We even had a large number of our coworkers choose to go to work at our Holly Springs Hospital, leaving main campus or our Chapel Hill campus. We expect that to be the same here because so many of our teammates live in Northern Wake County. So next slide, please. I show you this. This is a very initial rendering of what a hospital could look like. Please note it's not a final design by any means, but want you to conceptualize what a hospital would look like in Northern Wake County. We have signed a letter of intent with the Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary to purchase 50 acres behind the Wake Forest Crossing Shopping Center. This is off of Capitol Boulevard and Stadium, and we feel like it'll be extremely accessible to all the residents here in Rolesville, Wake Forest, Youngsville, and beyond. We also have a well-established Wakefield campus that offers urgent care, cancer care, ENT, outpatient, heart and vascular, family medicine, and lab services, as well as a robust surgery center. So over the coming years, we look to increase our services there in Wake Forest and in Rolesville so that our patients can have everything they need in one easy-to-access location. So next slide, next steps. As the mayor alluded to, there was a public hearing on October 18th. This is a very contentious certificate of need process. There were 12 applications for these beds and ORs from 4 different providers. So we know the CON committee is now reviewing these applications. We expect a decision in spring of 2025. If RACS is awarded this and we're able to build a hospital, we do expect there to be lengthy appeals. So it could be several years before we're able to move forward. But we feel really confident in our application and hope to be building here soon. So that is the end of my presentation. I want to thank you for having me here tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about our proposal.
Question for Board?
Thank you for coming.
Okay, great.
You said it was 12 or 14 applicants?
There were 12 applications from 4 different providers. We had 2, WakeMed had, I think, 3 or 4, Duke had 2, and then Novant had an application as well.
It's more than one going to be granted, right? More than one of those applications?
It depends how it works. None of the applicants applied for all the beds and all the ORs in one application. So there were 50 beds and a total of 4 operating rooms for the application. So we do expect that the award will be divvied up between multiple applications.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
goal is hit those numbers of 50 and 4 new
Correct.
operating rooms?
Correct. And they could say, the CON board could come back and say, UNC Health RACS, we give you 40 beds and 2 operating rooms, and then we can apply to add more over time.
I know the applicants are from throughout the county.
Correct.
Is there a need in one part, we're thinking about the northern part of the
Sure.
county, northeastern part of the county. Is there any part of the county, in more need than the
Yeah.
other parts of the county?
I mean, that's hard to determine, but if you look at where the growth is happening, it's really happening in northern Wake County and in southern Wake County. That's where we're seeing a lot of the growth. We are hopeful that this application is accepted because there isn't a hospital in Wake Forest. There is one in North Raleigh with WakeMed North. We're very good friends with them, but we think there is a serious need here when you look at northern Wake County as well as Franklin County and those residents who need that healthcare access as well. So we're hopeful it's competitive, but Wake County needs healthcare, period. Plain and simple, we're growing at a rapid pace and all of our current hospitals are max to capacity. So we're hopeful to be able to come here.
That's a good segue. Now that I'm curious,
Yeah.
with the need, you mentioned the appeal process.
Yes.
What does that typically look like in terms of timelines in the past?
It depends. I mean, it could be people settle, they go into arbitration, they choose to settle, and you're out of appeals in less than a year, or it could be a multi-year process. I'll let you know for our Holly Springs Hospital, we got the CON 10 years before we built that hospital.
Oh, wow.
The initial CON, and then it went through many years of appeals. We're currently in litigation for a hospital in Durham. I think we're in year 2 of appeals right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You may have said it, and I may have missed it, but who makes the final decision?
The CON board, the CON committee, which is run out of the Department of Health and Human Services.
So is it appointments? Is that
Mhm.
appointments?
They are appointed. Yes, sir.
Gotcha. And I guess that's approved by the legislators or something like that?
The CON committee, there is an appointment process that goes through DHHS and needs ultimate approval. Legislators don't necessarily appoint the CON committee, but DHHS is a government entity, so, yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you all for your time.
Thank
I
you for
appreciate it.
coming
We'll
out.
keep you updated throughout the process.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, our next item is a presentation draft of the Affordable Housing Plan from TPMA. I think I see Aaron, and also I see Ben here. So Aaron and Ben, y'all going to tag team it, or?
Yeah, I think so. We're going to try to squeeze on this podium.
Well, if you would, for the record, introduce yourselves and where you live.
Yeah, absolutely. While you're doing that, I can start.
Sure, go ahead.
Hopefully, we'll try to get this plugged in and make sure this is working. Thank you, Town Commissioners. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Commissioners, my name is Aaron Finley. I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development at TPMA. We are a nationwide, fully remote consulting firm in the space of economic and workforce development. I came here today from Dayton, Ohio. My colleague, Ben Halkowski, is working on getting our slide deck up and running. And he came today, drove over from Asheville, North Carolina. Oh, fantastic, it's working.
There we go.
So I'm going to go ahead, while you're getting everything set up, we, as many of you know, we've had the opportunity to meet some of you, have been working on affordable housing strategic plan for the town for, I think it's about 12 months. I think it's just been about a year now. We are here to present an overview of our findings and some goals that we've established as part of this report for the town of Rolesville, with an understanding that as part of your recent strategic planning process, a few goals around housing diversity were established as part of that. So with that in mind, we're presenting some information today, some data that we've found, some of our overall findings, and then, as I mentioned, our goals. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ben.
Thank you, Aaron. All right, so as Aaron mentioned, this was about a 12-month project moving into 13 and potentially 14, depending on how far along the public comment section goes. But again, we began this project in October with Project Launch, working with Town of Rolesville staff members. From there, we reviewed previous plans, economic development plans, transportation plans, things of that nature that are currently available for the town of Rolesville. One thing worth noting for this specific housing study is that this is kind of a new start for the town of Rolesville. This kind of study hasn't been done before. So this report is really meant to lay the groundwork going forward and help you all identify affordable housing solutions going forward. So again, we reviewed some previous plans, applied those, made sure that the goals and strategies we are creating in this report are aligned with the goals and strategies that you all have identified in other reports. So once February hit, we did a stakeholder engagement process, interviewing folks across the community. We launched a public opinion survey, and also connected with, we did some in-person planning sessions with folks across Wake County, trying to elevate strategies and priorities for Rolesville specifically. Once we got all of that completed, we did some assessment and analysis, so gathering housing data, housing information, overlaying that with what stakeholders mentioned to us, and making sure we built out a strategic framework throughout the month of October that really fit the town's needs. And here we are today in November, presenting on the report. Hopefully you all find it to your liking, and we'll go from there. So this is the engagement overview. Some of the stakeholders that we connected with: Beyond Church, Coastal Credit Union, Habitat for Humanity of Wake County. I'm not going to read through this entire list. You can see the list right here. But again, we did stakeholder engagement workshops with a lot of these organizations, subject matter interviews with many of these organizations to understand what are the challenges here, what are the challenges in Wake County, what are some of the challenges specifically in Rolesville, and what are the opportunities that we have to overcome some of those challenges and barriers.
So, thank you, Ben. So with that, we'll get to our kind of key findings in our report. Overall, don't think any of these will be a huge surprise to you, but through a collection of our quantitative and qualitative data collection and analysis, these are some of the key findings that we'd like to present. Obviously, one, and nobody will be shocked to hear that there's a rapidly growing population in the area, but also specifically in the town of Rolesville, which is a community with high household incomes and leading in many ways to, with the overall growth in population, the increased demand, kind of decreasing notion of affordability, housing affordability throughout the town. Also, what we're calling kind of an imbalance in housing stock, and I'd be happy to kind of answer questions about that here towards the end, but not a particularly broad mix of housing types throughout the town. And part of that is in connection to what we're calling barriers to building a variety of housing types, and we'll get into some of those through our presentation today. And some of the decreasing, the lack of affordability, the decreasing affordability, and that lack of variety of housing types is really pointing to a very specific kind of limited set of options for what you might consider your workforce or your service workers, or really a wide cross-section of population as well. So to get into these findings, a little bit of background on the rapid population growth. Again, shouldn't be a big surprise to you, but worth paying attention. As you see on our table here on the left, we are looking at an additional, I don't know, roughly 7,000 people in the last 10 years. From 2013 to 2018, there was an increase in 73% and an additional increase of 40% in the last 5 years up to 2023. Obviously, along with that, you see growth in Wake County as a whole, but Rolesville growing at a particularly rapid pace as when compared to the county. And you can see that population trend with some projections there through 2029 of approaching 15,000 people for the town. We talk also about barriers to affordability. On the top of our chart here, we have the 10-year change in rent. That has gone up over 31% in 10 years. Actually, I think we might need to update that metric as well. We're going to look at some of the rental figures here in a couple slides. Sale price, the median sale price for townhomes has increased over 135% in 10 years, which is a significant increase. Again, probably not surprising, but maybe of value to see those numbers there. And also about 100% increase in single-family detached homes as well. You can see a very busy chart along the bottom. The most important thing to note there is actually median sales price in these last 2 years or so has really skyrocketed at a similar time when the number of units selling, right, the kind of supply, I guess, in the field has gone down. Overall, we have seen a little bit of a dip from the peak in the median sale price. However, I wouldn't expect it to necessarily return to some of those early years. We expect that to kind of plateau, if not continue to increase here in coming years. We talked about the kind of housing mix, I guess, if you will. In the town right now, 88% of all housing types are single-family homes, leaving 12% for not single-family. I think that's even single-family detached homes, 88%. And also, we have 91% of all housing types, all households, I guess, are owner-occupied households. Fewer than 10% are renter-occupied households. Part of that is related to, of course, the development trends that you see in the chart, the bar chart there on the right, in which single-family structures, maybe not surprisingly, but significantly kind of dominate the kinds of production, the kinds of development that's been going on in the town, since really that big population boom, after 2010 or so. So you see those numbers in the red, those are units in multifamily structures. Those are not actual multifamily structures. So that would include, really in this case, I think even townhomes, anything that's not a single-family detached structure. So there are a lack of rental housing options here in the town. I believe there's only two and really kind of one multifamily rental property, which is at Granite Falls. We just drove through there just a few moments ago on our way here. Half of them, as you know, are the income restricted. Now, this is the LIHTC developments, which is the low income housing tax credit development, which is split between income restricted and age and income restricted. So half of them are for senior affordable and the others are family affordable units. I think it's a 50-50 split, so I split them, it's 146 across the two. That's where you're seeing that rent, and I know there have been some frustration around rising rent in that age-restricted community. We noticed that as well, and again, we can kind of talk about that a little bit. But even that rent is significantly lower, as you'll notice, from the private home rentals, which are renting, if you just go looking for, how can I go rent a home right now? In Rolesville, they're roughly around $2,000 at the starting point. I think you could maybe find one for $1,890 or, something like this, but more or less $2,000. And then, of course, the currently in development, and I believe we saw that in 3 days, they're starting their first tours of the Cobblestone Village apartments, which will significantly add to the market rate rental opportunities and multifamily development opportunities in the city. And then, of course, as you notice, we split those kind of private rentals across those single-family detached or townhomes. And then there are, by the numbers we pull, about 67 manufactured homes in the town as well. So again, looking at the strategic plan goals of creating diverse housing, there are some real barriers to doing that a lot, and some of them relate directly to policy. So what we've done here is we looked at Knightdale, which we might see as kind of an approximation of what maybe the future Rolesville might look like. We're looking at some of they're about double, I think, the population of Rolesville right now. And just from conversations we hear, it might be a reasonably comparable market to take a look at. Some of the big issues here are the setbacks that are currently part of the LDO. And again, I'm happy to get into details if we want to or not, but more or less what you're seeing is some very large and limiting kinds of size to those setbacks that you see in the current zoning. Minimum lot size, also a real barrier. When you look at those setbacks and minimum lot size together, reports from local developers who've been interested in buying here, essentially saying, with the rules that are on the books right now, we can only build $1 million homes. Those are the only options that we have. So again, if we think about the opportunities for building a greater variety of housing types, there are some barriers that are in existence in current policy. Just also a comparison for the kind of comparable zones for low density residential, medium density residential, and higher density residential for Knightdale. Similar situation. You'll see there even 3 units per acre in the Knightdale, which is pretty low as far as even the low residential is concerned. Those units per acre here are 2. So outside of a cluster development, again, maybe this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but essentially the only way to build in over 60% of zoned land in Rolesville is to build on a half-acre lot, unless in a subdivision, in which case there are different requirements for those cluster developments. Overall, one of the things that's worth kind of noting is the percentage of all zoned land, and that's within the town limits and the extra jurisdictional boundaries. Only 1.2% would permit any kind of development that is not a single-family detached home. So even duplexes, triplexes, we're not even talking about massive apartment complexes necessarily, but even a duplex or something like this, only permissible at right now. And I hear there's been some recent kind of special use or rezonings that have taken place in the last year or so, but it hasn't increased that number up much, potentially past 2%. So even in Knightdale, similar kind of situation, 3 times more. Still a low number, as you can see, but still 3 times greater than is permitted in Rolesville right now. Again, happy to answer any questions about this as we move along. But with that, also looking at our estimated 10-year demand for new housing types. predicting the future is it's not a good business that you want to be in. It's very difficult. I'm sure 10 years ago, nobody would have seen this many people potentially in Rolesville now. So don't come back to me in 10 years and say, Aaron, you said there were only going to be 1,300 new units needed. It quite possibly could be larger than that. But looking at some of the ways that we put our housing demand models together, and we do it kind of on a customized basis for each one of our projects, we are expecting annualized demand at 136 units per year, and in 10 years, that 1,356 units. When you see the for sale and for rent breakdown here, that is to maintain the existing ratios of single family of for sale to for rent. So in a hypothetical situation, which we said we actually want to create more rental opportunities, then these numbers would be, adjusted around whatever that future vision, that goal that Rolesville sets. But to maintain the current existing ratio, that's what we anticipate the demand being in the next 10 years. Okay, with that, I'll hand it back to Ben.
All right, back over to me. So through this process, we also created a SWOT analysis. And again, this was through stakeholder engagement processes and looking at data and information that is available for Rolesville. Some of the strengths that we found, regional economic growth equaling high wage job opportunities. So as you're all aware, you're proximal to Raleigh, which is a growing area. A lot of industry bringing up these high wage jobs, which creates a situation where folks are able to afford some of the current housing in Rolesville. So all that to say, you have high wage jobs within the area. A small town feel with connected neighbors, but natural landscapes and green spaces. So as we were driving throughout Rolesville today, we saw little pocket parks, pocket greenways, places for people to walk. That's a very attractive place for people to be around, or those are attractable amenities for people to be around. So all that to say, there are things that are bringing people into Rolesville, clearly. Weaknesses, need for a clear and unified vision for the future of housing in Rolesville. Again, this is one of the first plans of its kind for Rolesville. So we added a vision statement based on stakeholder engagement to the plan. You might want to flesh that out with some of the residents that you have in the community to make sure that that is the exact vision that you want to proceed with. But again, creating processes and procedures to clarify that vision further. Policy limitations on development opportunities and diversifying housing. Don't need to beat a dead horse here. Aaron went over a lot of this information through some of the findings, but we have found that there are zoning policies and other regulations that are making it difficult to create affordable housing in Rolesville. Lack of established public-private partnerships for housing. I will say this one, with this one specifically, this was written a couple of weeks to months ago. As of late, we've had a lot of conversations with folks from Wake County Housing. Meredith's been working on some of those efforts. So it seems like there's a lot of traction for this specific, going towards this specific weakness. So as these plans are written, there are things that are still operating outside of it. So I wouldn't focus too much on that. Opportunities available and developable land. Through looking at development maps and things of that nature, we have found that there is land that is available for development. So there is opportunity to create more affordable housing in Rolesville. Existing resources and partnerships within the Greater Triangle region. So again, going back to that weakness where we mentioned lack of established public-private partnerships. There are so many organizations across Wake County that are here to support you all and affordable housing development in the area. So keeping an eye and trying to build partnerships with those organizations would be a healthy strategy. Live Tech priority point for areas within Wake County. So the way Live Tech works, there's a grading system. Wake County receives a priority point based on some of the measurements that they track throughout the Live Tech applications. One of the challenges with Rolesville that we found out through our peer review process is that the lack of accessibility to amenities is one barrier for Rolesville. So we're currently in conversations with some of the Rolesville County staff on what would it look like to create more, availability for Live Tech properties in Rolesville. So, but either way, there's an opportunity there to pursue more Live Tech developments if that is of interest. Threats trickle out growth sprawl from Raleigh. So as there is higher demand, that's going to drive up prices for housing. So that is an imminent threat that we're all kind of aware of at this point. water and sewer infrastructure restrictions. So this was through stakeholder engagement mainly. We heard that it has been increasingly difficult for certain developers to create housing due to the current water infrastructure with the city of Raleigh. And then the last threat that we identified was state level housing policy restrictions. So we can go into this a little bit later, but one of the big things that we kind of study in a lot of these, one of the first things that we look at in a lot of these housing studies is the state aid, home rule state or Dillon's rule state. Home rule states essentially allow localities to pursue strategies that they see fit. Dillon's rule states create more of a legal gray area where they're only allowed to pursue strategies that are permitted by that state. So again, we can get into that further, and North Carolina is a Dillon's rule state. So it makes it a little bit muddy for cities to pursue affordable housing strategies. So goal 1, plan for the future of housing. I'm just going to click through these here so they're all readily available to you. So again, work to establish and enact a vision for growth. Consider establishing an affordable housing fund. Explore possibilities for expanding infrastructure. Be a little bit of a... Okay. Well, there we go. Goal 2, diversify the housing mix. So we've been on this already, but adjust housing ordinance to allow for greater variety of housing types, including multifamily development. Identify areas best suited for middle density and multifamily development. So where do you want to put some of those structures? Create more opportunities for the development of rental housing, and consider development fee waivers to address existing gaps in housing stock and encourage new affordable housing development. In goal 3, focus efforts on developing a housing ecosystem to evaluate the capacity of existing staff for meeting the current and future needs. Participate in regional housing efforts and partnerships. Convene conversations with local builders and developers. And number 4, develop and launch public education campaign around topics of housing. All right, turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So just, we'll open it up for questions here in just a moment. The next steps for our report, we are going to be posting a report in a draft form for a public comment period of, I believe, 30 days was the decided amount of time. While we're doing that, we will work to receive the comments that we get, the feedback that we get from the public, any comments and feedback we get today from our session, and then we'll work to finalize our design and create a final report to present. With that, we're happy to open up today for any questions, knowing that it's an important topic, but also one that's kind of maybe highly charged in some ways. So we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Let's refer back at all.
To any of our slots, sure.
Let's give the planning board the first shot at it. So, y'all got any questions? Anybody want to ask any questions? Come.
Yeah, so we're working with town staff right now to find the best way. Oftentimes, a link provided both on, an official website or put out if there are, social media platforms or something that have official designation can put some of the information out there. It will be available online, and there will be information there about how to fill out a brief kind of questionnaire or survey to see if there's any feedback, if there are any questions or anything like that. Once we get those comments, we will include them in the final version of the report in an appendix, all the comments and feedback that we receive.
What about other questions? Any other questions from the planning board? Come up so everybody can hear it.
For those of you that may not know, I'm Mike Moss on the planning board. I just thought one comment they made about the kind of the roadblocks of developing. When we adopted the new new UDO, well, not the LDO, we had some smaller lot sizes, and they went back and they were increasing size because of the there were some board members that didn't like the smaller lot sizes, and now it's like it's coming back to us that we need to go back to those smaller lot sizes to allow for some of those developments. So I think as a board and commissioners, we may need to decide, where we really want to go. Because we set the LDO up for small lot sizes, then we immediately decided we didn't like small lots. And now we're being advised maybe we should go back to the small lots. So it's like, I think as a town, we may need to decide where we really want to be and where we need to land.
And hopefully with some of the discussion tonight, we can get closer or make some decisions tonight.
And I know I work with a lot of developers also. I'm a land surveyor, and I work with several developers around the community. And I've been told that this not allowing the small lot sizes has had some developers look in other areas where they can put small lots in and get a higher density, because the land prices are dictating what needs to be put on this property, because the land in this area has gotten really expensive, and you just have to get the density to make it work. And if the numbers don't work, the developers will go somewhere else where it will work.
Any other comments? I don't know if that was a question to any of them or not, was it?
Not really.
Yeah. But any other comments from anybody? I guess to follow up with what Mike says there, do you see a direct correlation between lot sizes and affordability?
Yeah, to answer that question directly, Mayor, and thank you for it. Absolutely. I think one of the things that we're finding is, the setbacks right now outside of cluster development are 30 feet in the front yard, which is essentially more than a two-story building lying on its side that we're requiring, right, to have people have that amount of yard, and an additional 25 feet in the backyard. To Mike, is it? To Mike's point, that restricts in many ways, right, the uses of the land. So in parts of land that are not being utilized, essentially lost money for a developer, right? That's money that they have to pay for that land, but they can't get any kind of return on it because it just has to stay, vacant, open space. As we see, construction costs have really climbed quite a bit over the pandemic. So that's obviously relating specifically to the cost to produce a building, to develop a building, any kind of building, whether it's single family, multifamily, those are going up a lot. So when we are requiring that the smallest lot outside of a cluster is a half acre, and even on that half acre lot, we need to, essentially constrict the size of the house. Now, on a half acre lot, the setbacks alone, because you can only build a single family home on there, might not necessarily limit the size of the structure that can be put there. But what it does limit is the ability to use, if you have a full acre, and you have a minimum of 2 units per acre and the 20,000 foot minimum lot size, the most you can get out of that acre with the setbacks, with the requirements, is 2 homes. In Nightdale, it's 3 homes. For an acre to only have 3 homes on it, obviously is not giving you a lot of supply for the amount of investment in the land and the construction costs and everything like that. So where those additional restrictions exist, whether that's lot sizes, minimum lot sizes, whether that's units per acre, or whether those are setbacks, all of those restrictions increase the cost to produce housing on land and limit the amount of housing that can then be placed on that land and then sold, which is a return for the developers. So I don't know if that is a roundabout way, but certainly there is a direct correlation between those restrictions and the cost to develop it or limit the ability to have more affordable housing.
So my question with that is, if I'm looking at it and I'm the developer, and the house is $400,000 we're building right now with restrictions, the town releases all the restrictions on it, I could build more houses on that land. They're still going to be $400,000 each. It doesn't matter what they do to it. So how do we work to make it affordable on the developer side of it? They're trying to make as much money as they want or can, which is understandable, but how do you make it so it's beneficial for us to be able to try to offer that kind of thing?
Yes. So I think I understand the question, Commissioner. So thank you. So that's right. The cost of construction is the cost of construction. So say it's going to cost, and we're hearing, single family home, it's going to cost just in materials and labor, construction costs, $250,000 just to create the structure. So there are things beyond that that we can do to incentivize, whether that's the waiver of development fees, whether that is the ability to create more homes on a single acre, then that's 3 homes that can be sold at some kind of profit as opposed to 2. So obviously having fewer restrictions on that would make that more feasible. One of the things that we've done, what we see in the cluster developments, right, those reductions of lot sizes, a reduction of setbacks in those cluster developments is, I think, to accommodate the requirement for the 40% of land in a cluster development to be contiguous open space. So we understand, well, we're requiring you guys all this open space, so we will allow you to build things closer together, right? Understanding, of course, that allowing to build things closer together, creates more opportunity for structures and sales and all those kinds of things because they've given the 40% of the land. So there are ways to kind of incentivize or encourage. Even if we were to get rid of all those restrictions, it's still very expensive to build a home. So there's still real challenges to affordability. There's no doubt about it. And happy to continue to go into those, but, I think a starting point is kind of potentially opening up some of those restrictions and at least allowing for a greater variety. One of the other things, just really quickly, when you think about variety of housing types, most often you're going to get that, obviously, having a structure that's a little bit more permissive of different housing types. But then also what you tend to see is that large scale developers are going to build a lot of the same kind of home. That's just kind of how those models are structured. So we understand we've given kind of permissions in some ways for large scale developers to create subdivisions, right? To create cluster development. But you tend to get greater variety where it's permissible through local, smaller scale developers who are not just trying to really kind of, bang out a lot of the same kind of housing and then move on to the next thing. And so you'll see kind of just individual, maybe homes or something like this. When we create those permissions for cluster developments, we say, we understand we're asking a lot through our restrictions. So we'll give, these kind of ways to encourage you to still be interested in doing cluster development. You're really permitting only large-scale developers to kind of come in and take advantage of some of those situations, which just means you're going to get a lot of the same type of housing. They're the ones with the financial resources, the plans, you know what I mean, and all these kinds of things to kind of utilize those. So there are opportunities to account for some of those restrictions in cluster, but even those opportunities are still moving in the direction of keeping, limiting the kind of the diversity of supply.
I think I agree with Paul. In my experience, reducing a lot don't reduce the price of the house.
Well, it's a matter of like, let's say, this is just a crazy example. You have an acre of land. You see that they're going to bring in cottage homes, and they can only build 2 cottage homes right now. And we take all the restrictions away, and they build 4 cottage homes. And you're like, wow, that's going to be great. It's the same price. No matter if there's 2 or there's 4, it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't give us any diversity with anything we have. So that's the biggest issue we have. And I know, like you said, so like more local builders, that might make more sense to work with people like that. But it's just it just looks bad on us if we just relax everything and nothing ever changes.
Well, and another factor to be considered is when you're easing restrictions, you're increasing the population density. And the fact of our town is we don't have the infrastructure to support a high density population. This board just rejected a 240 apartment complex on Main Street. And largely, I can't speak for everyone, but my side was we can't handle the traffic. So does it make sense to put population density in our town? We're the classic version of urban sprawl. So single family homes may be the best solution for our town. And we just approved a project that is, I think it's 505 units. And I think there's 5 or 6 different models. And we did approve a text amendment to allow for a 40-foot lot. So, we did adopt that for the purpose of trying to bring in a variety of different housing types for a single development.
So bring you into discussion, Dave. Can we directly tie smaller lot sizes with the price points of houses? In other words, can we do it, if we're going to reduce the lot size, can we do it and say, you know, you can't build but for 30%, you know, people or 40% or whatever? Can we do that?
So I can't think of a way you can do it directly. A way you could do it indirectly would be through a zoning regulation that provides that low-income tax credit communities, right, can be built on smaller lots.
Example of the
So
55.
a qualifying project would be incentivized. Those kind of projects would be incentivized to take a look at Rolesville, because those projects, their pro formas could look better because the same amount of land will yield a higher density of units, and that then moves into a plus in the matrix, whereas, as you heard from the consultant, the amenities is currently maybe a minus, right? Is that an answer to the question? What I am not aware that you can do is, Mr. Rezoning applicant, I will allow you to build on a smaller lot if you promise to always sell for half the market value or something like that. Probably not. Although, is that all that much different? I think there might be an argument, but I think it's just as likely that you could end up with someone suing to get out of that regime soon after you approved it, saying that you're unconstitutionally restraining the free alienability of this land.
So,
Seller's going to want to sell. The next seller's going to want to sell for as much as they can get. This is the number one problem with affordable housing.
On a small piece of
It's
property.
the biggest problem with affordable housing in the free market setting, outside of any federal program or state program or Wake County affordable housing program, is the developer says, I will sell a unit to someone who makes at or below 80% AMI. That person buys the house, they bought it at 80%. They bought it at a number that they could qualify for, and they were put in that spot. And then they have 2 kids, and they want a bigger house, so they go to sell. They will list it for whatever the market will bear, unless there is some government or private contract restriction on them. Now, that may be okay. That's a windfall to a person who was making 80% of AMI, but you haven't established long-term affordability that way. You've just sort of taken some money from the developer and given it to the first home buyer.
Yeah, I'll use your word indirectly. You may do that indirectly because, like, you know, we're talking about if you land smaller size lots and you got to build it first for that qualification to start with, and it's a smaller house naturally.
Right.
So you're building a smaller inventory that probably will indirectly, you know, make a result in the long term.
That's right.
You know, that makes sense.
As the consultants pointed out, as Commissioner Vilga has mentioned, as other commissioners have mentioned, the link in my experience between lot size and affordability is only at the macro level. My planning friends, including many of the planning directors in this state, their strategy at this point is to try to catch up to the demand.
Yeah.
We know that if I'm a new car dealer, I'm a Honda car dealer, I'll just use an example because I drive a Honda. If Honda Corporate hands me twice as many Accords in 2024, I don't sell them for half the price. I still sell them for the full price so long as I can. But if Honda and Toyota and Nissan all give the dealers in my market twice as many units as we would have expected, the price would come down. That's the idea. Can local governments create a system in the market writ large? So let's say the triangle, however you want to define how many counties that is now, such that we could outbuild the market. That will make the price come down.
to that point, and thank you, to that point, in areas where we have rapidly growing population and therefore rapidly growing demand, if we are not creating additional supply to meet that demand, hypothetically, you would see prices continue to rise and rise and rise. I don't think the notion that, right now we drove through Granite Falls, and I think there was a sign saying new homes starting at 750,000. I would not expect that would be the peak, that we would necessarily see that unless we start to see demand falling, people not wanting to come here potentially because of the cost of housing or whatever that might be. And to your point, Commissioner, I think that's absolutely right. There's not a lot of existing infrastructure to support population growth that we've already seen. It is one way to look at that is that Rolesville seems to be positioned for growth and high demand, whether we want it to or not. And so I think part of the point, we're trying to make is understanding as we expect growth, as we see growth coming, making sure that maybe there is some level of consensus, there is some level of vision about how to anticipate it, how to manage that growth, right, is a term that you see a lot, and making sure that one thing that we see is that in some communities that experience this rapid growth in population, this rapid growth in demand, and there are attempts to kind of keep things the way they are, right? Which we understand the desire to do that. Oftentimes, at some point, in some situations, the dam will break, and then we have no choice but to install, develop these massive multifamily, many stories, and that change feels very abrupt and is very disconcerting. And I think that's potentially what you're voicing right now, some of the feeling of what that might be like. Ideally, theoretically, allowing and setting visions and plans to develop incrementally and in a targeted way, identifying, what that vision is and where we might identify land and areas to help us meet that vision, hopefully will allow for a more, less disruptive, kind of rapid growth structure in theory.
And we're not an island unto ourselves.
Of course.
Wake Forest has built 7,000 apartments in the last couple of years. There's tons of availability. So just because we don't have a ton of it here in Rolesville doesn't mean it's not available. I talked about it before. I had someone in my office do a study, do a call developments. They all have availability. And, they start at about $1,200 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. So I don't know that we've defined affordability, but just because Rolesville doesn't have a ton of apartments doesn't mean we lack available housing for the workforce, for example. Just if it's
As a
5 minutes
region.
away,
Yeah.
that it's still effectively available for our workforce, even though it may not be within the confines of Rolesville itself.
Sure, absolutely. Exactly. No community exists on an island.
No.
Everything else we understood in regional context. There's no doubt about it.
You guys jump back in. Anything you could, no? I thought I saw you wanted to say something. And anything you want to add or question, anything?
I did not have anything to say, Mayor.
Okay. Want to make sure everybody has input. What about anybody else? What about you, Diane? Anything?
Yes, sir. I mean, everything kind of comes back to price. It's on. Oh, you can hear me? Okay. With pricing and trying to figure out how can we fix it? Meaning, for example, one of your slides I noticed had the Grande, had another apartment on it. If you don't mind, go back to that slide. Because when people, meaning builders, look at Rolesville, it always goes back to how much money do they make in Rolesville? And when you look at the census, it always come back and get us a lot, meaning that they can afford the $500,000-$600,000 homes. Why? Because it saves it in their gross. With the Granite Falls and the Grande, for example, those are adjusted by the AMI. So some of them have a like 60%,
60% AMI, correct.
and 30%. Actually, my aunt started out until she hit over the age limit and moved from one apartment to the other. And now she experienced the hurt of her rent still going up.
Yeah.
So we talking about aging seniors. Social Security is not enough. Talking about the younger market, meaning that they haven't developed into their jobs yet, or their profession, or their businesses yet, to where they can afford. So we're talking about a younger crowd that is telling me that they can't even afford a home right now.
Yeah.
And scared, as well as a senior that don't have the money to even maintain the level. So we're stuck. How do you expect us to fix that?
So this is a great question. It is the question in many ways, Commissioner. One of the things we didn't get into with our presentation today, but sometimes I can talk at great length about, as I'm sure you can already imagine, is what we call the kind of housing life cycle. What we have now is a lot of housing supply for established or maybe even growing families. But to your point, I think that on either ends of the kind of that housing lifestyle spectrum there, that's where we think about a variety of housing types might be of benefit, whether those are downsizing seniors. Because one of the things that happens is we have people who raise their family here, maybe the kids, they've left, they may be in other parts of the state, wherever they might be. They don't need the size of the house anymore. If we don't have smaller, accessible kinds of options, they're going to stay in their homes because they want to be in the same community that they've grown up in, they raised their family in. They don't necessarily maybe want to move somewhere else. It's a big disruption. And that's why we think about that variety of housing types. If there are, hypothetically, different kinds of housings, whether those are the cottage communities, some smaller, maybe single family, maybe one-story options, which actually fill those kinds of smaller homes, can fill some of those needs on both sides. They tend to be a little bit more affordable because they're not the $1 million homes that we got to drive by today. And then it also can create a little bit more churn in the market. People selling their homes, right? Having a little bit more, not a huge amount, but a little bit more of the supply where people are saying, okay, we're ready to downsize. We see an option down the street. We can put our home on the market now. And so there is some restriction of supply happening because there's not a lot of options for mobility, a wide variety of options for people to do things like downsizing. And then I think to your point as well, on the younger end of the spectrum, there are not a lot of starter homes in the area, right? So if people are concerned, well, I would love, we had somebody here earlier who went to high school in the area. Maybe a lot of people who grew up around here. I just moved back home into the area I went to high school in. Probably not have a lot of options to purchase homes in this area. So what happens on the other side when we have a limited options for downsizing and we don't have a lot of options for new community members, new families to start in, and a lot of people staying in their homes for a variety of reasons. Some of that restricts supply. It's also really, when we think about long-term kind of resilience of the economy, resilience of the area. You want to have options for people at different points in their lives, and just a lot of variety. We also have found, just to this point, when we think about economic resiliency, communities that have the highest percentage of single-family detached homes, and we saw it's roughly 90-10 in this community, are actually considerably more susceptible to economic downturns, to foreclosure crises, and things of that nature. So we also think about long-term sustainability. Having a variety of rental and option and different sizes tends to relate more directly to the ability to sustain economic downturns as well.
One of the things I would suggest is that, especially for our community, we talk about the grande. The issue that we have is not the people that have the luxury of deciding to downsize because it works for them. It's people that maybe have struggled their lives, worked their lives, haven't amassed a fortune or anything, and now they're on a fixed income, typically Social Security, and they live in a place like the Grande, and then they suffer rent increases. So for us, I think the more pronounced problem that is and will continue to be for the foreseeable future is affordable housing for our senior community, because our senior community now is over 20% of our population.
Yes.
And I think about 50% of the people moving into the whole Raleigh-Durham area are seniors. So it's not going away. So that to me makes sense to focus on that aspect of it, certainly.
I think so, Commissioner. And again, I know I've been up here a long time, and I'm happy to answer questions, or we can, have another conversation.
Yeah, we're doing good on time, so don't worry about that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. One of the things that we see in the Grande is, so those rents have increased recently. We charted the rent in that particular development over the years. They had dropped right at the pandemic level, and then they did almost double or something like this. But in some ways, excuse me, that is not what I meant to have happen. My apologies. It's time to take my allergy medicine. At any rate, so you see that rent increase, which was greater even than it was before it dipped down, but those are tied to your area median income, right? So as the community becomes more affluent.
They actually weren't. They took the opportunity to raise them to the HUD cap. So it had nothing to do with tying to any consumer price index or anything else. They just went in and myself and others here, the mayor, were very involved in that whole process. I talked to them at length to try and forestall those increases. So it was significant, and a number of people had to move out because they couldn't afford it.
Right. And the HUD cap is tied to the area median income, however, right? That's the 60% cap.
Well, they just raised them to the HUD cap. With some of them were $600-800 a month, and they went up to $1447 or something.
Like 16 units out of 73 that they had to maintain a price on. And they couldn't change those.
So to your point, though, however, Commissioner, in order to think about affordable senior housing, we talked about restrictions, and we talked about really construction costs. In a lot of cases, in order to bring something down to what you might consider a true affordable level, whether that's Social Security, or something like that, that would kind of set that threshold of what is affordability, typically requires very significant, and we talked about the LIHTC applications that are extremely competitive, even though Wake County has a priority point right now. They're still extremely competitive. It's not a guaranteed, we were talking about the RFP that was put out, and there's some concern about whether or not some of the plan should be tied to those 9% allocations because of how difficult they are. But without very significant subsidies, and for example, there is a 4% allocation that is less competitive, to say the least, but doesn't seem to make things pencil, doesn't seem to make things kind of feasible for the developers. And so I'll put it this way, although it sometimes gets me into trouble. When we think about real affordability, when we talk about whether, let's say, what can be afforded on Social Security income, there's not really a free market solution out there for real affordability. Now, that doesn't mean the town of Rolesville should immediately take I don't know, $20 million, right away and start to establish an affordable housing fund. There's not probably $20 million just lying around. Commissioners, there $20 million lying around? I wouldn't think so. And so when we think about true affordability, because as Dave mentioned, a lot of this is kind of macro level and slow moving and all those kinds of things. When we talk about trying to create actual units that are affordable in this community, it is extremely, extremely difficult. Ben mentioned some of the state level policy that is a little bit restrictive as well. And the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency does what they can with the resources that they have. They have to make hard decisions about who gets these allocations and a lot of these things, and they put together programs that can be beneficial, and we obviously want to make sure we're utilizing to the best of our ability. But to create those affordable units, whether it's age restricted or just families who are struggling, and have at that 60% AMI, which even that is quite high when you consider a relatively affluent community. Subsidies are required. and to create those units. There's just not a very good free market solution for that. But most of our housing development is built on the notion of supply and demand, on free market concepts and ideas. And so on the micro level, there are very, very few options available to creating those kinds of developments that we need, that you note that your community is really searching for. And so oftentimes aggressive and innovative strategies are come out of that, but there's always the risk of being sued, when you want to be innovative and things of that nature. So it's not an easy solution. It's not an easy problem to address. And that's why I think, to your point, if it's decided that this is our target, we need affordable age-restricted units. Although I think when we checked at the Grande, I think there's about a 20% vacancy there, but it could be because rent got too high, right? Makes total sense.
It was full before they did that.
What's that?
It was full to capacity.
I fully believe it, and there's obviously very limited capacity at the other half of that development. I think the first step, and again, to Mike's point, and kind of one of the things that we really led off with is, I think we need to figure out what our targets are, right? Not even metrics and trackable targets, but what do we need and what do we want the future of this community to look like? And then think about how we put those strategies in place. Because, and again, to be frank, and it's not specific to Rolesville. We work all over the country and have these conversations, and they're hard with everybody. But what you might call a laissez-faire, right, approach to housing development, which is just kind of, we're going to step back and let developers do what they, can make money on and what is in their best interest, is creating a bigger problem than, than might otherwise exist if there were a little bit more hands-on, trying to focus in what we're trying to accomplish with our local housing policy and putting those steps in process to get there. Because having a more hands-off approach tends to just kind of perpetuate the forces that have led us to what feels like an affordability crisis to me, where we are right now, if we can't build something less than a $750,000 million home or something like that.
I agree. That's why we're here tonight, to have some discussions and see what direction we need to go in. It's good information. Thank you very much.
Anything else from the board? One last thing, I appreciate it. Good presentation. Thanks for the hard work you guys have put in. And also Meredith and the whole team that's been working behind it. Thanks a lot for that. And I think I've talked to you about this, Aaron, and I wanted, Dave is important because, he has to keep us, as you say, not getting sued. But I think Raleigh handles it a little bit. They have districts. I understand they have districts, and looking at some of their meetings, they have districts. And in their districts, Dave, they have goals. So they'll set a goal in a district to have 15% affordability in there or something like that. It's a goal. But I guess if somebody comes in and it doesn't really meet the goal that they're looking for in that district, the board has the option of not. I guess even it's probably in front of that, the planning board and the staff is telling them this is what the commissioner's looking for in this district is 15% affordability or something like that. So that's evident, that's legal.
Sure. So it all depends upon how it ends up before the town, whether it ends up here on a zoning case or an annexation case or both, or whether it ends up before the staff on a site plan. If the property is already zoned, then it's an administrative case. Our LDO, the building code will be applied, and it'll be approved if it fits, regardless of affordability or anything like that. If an applicant comes forward to the board and says, currently it's zoned for low-density residential, and I'd like for you to consider it to be rezoned to high-density residential, what is before you is, I think your law in this town is wrong, and you should change it. It's up to the person standing there to convince you that what they're proposing is better for the laws of the town of Rolesville, right? Because presumably the way the zoning is today is correct. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the zoning that it is today. We know in reality, things are zoned in many communities for rural, residential, or residential low, so that there is political power for the town when someone comes along and wants to develop. And that is okay. The way the General Assembly has tried to narrow the discretion that boards have is by forcing boards to adopt a consistency statement with their own comprehensive plan. Of course, the comprehensive plan does not have to be written in any particular way. Many towns, including ours, have pretty aggressive comprehensive plans that call for business parks and high-density residential and mixed use and all sorts of intense uses that when the zoning case comes forward, at least as often as not, one or more elected officials will say, we're not ready for that. So there's a question, perhaps the comp plan is wrong. Perhaps more parts of the community are appropriately designated for low-density residential. So that is a long-winded answer to you have a ton of discretion at the zoning level, including making the applicant aware that you're pretty much okay with the status quo unless there's a reason to change. For example, an affordability goal that the town has announced, and this helps achieve it. That's fine. It's not an ordinance, and the person can abandon their zoning case and go build out their land the way they wish and not take affordability into account at all.
Yeah, I guess to boil it down a little bit deeper than that, I know a lot of the cases that's come before this board, I hear the commissioners saying, do you have any affordability in the neighborhood? It could be 500 units like we just talked about, or 400 units. Do you have any affordability in there? And most time I hear them say, no, how do we do that? We don't know how to do that. We don't, we don't do that. But I guess what I'm saying is, if we have a goal that for those neighborhoods have affordability in them, I mean, we can't make them do it, but I guess we can judge them better, maybe, if we can legally do that. In other words, if somebody comes in the future, if we say we're looking for the neighborhoods have 10% affordability, and they come with one that has none in the future, I mean, we can't not prove it just for that point, but it doesn't meet our goal either.
Sure.
So, so does that level, is that legal, and does that add a level of
What is certainly legal would be to adopt a town-wide goal of generating more affordable housing and making sure every applicant for every community is aware of that. It becomes closer when you identify certain properties and say, these are the ones that I want to have affordability, because that is not one of the city's listed powers.
Yeah, I think Raleigh, they have these districts, and I think the districts
With goals. It's goals, sort of general goals.
Right.
And at the end of the day, the city council they have many goals. There's goals for increasing transit. There's goals for increasing interconnectivity. Some projects do a little better than others, as you know, as well as I do. But the goal is certainly helpful for guiding the development community. The number one thing I hear in my role as town attorney when the development community reaches out to me is, I just need everybody to tell me what they want. Yep. Everyone hears that. Then you tell them what they want, and they say, oh, I don't really want that answer. But at least that's the idea. And so I've been dragged in. I can talk about affordable housing maybe as much as these guys. I love this topic. I love zoning regulation. I'm a firm believer that old housing stock is the most affordable housing stock we have. Unfortunately, it's built on our least dense houses. But if you go look at the stats, the cheapest housing you have in your town is the old ranches in your town. If you can put accessory dwelling units behind those existing houses, those small 800 to 1,100 square foot houses, they'll be cheap. Most towns don't permit it. So that's real market-based, real answer right away. But the neighbors will come out screaming if you start putting houses in the neighbor's backyard. state's thinking about, I know there are legislators who are thinking about making an accessory dwelling unit a property right in the state of North Carolina.
So back in, I guess it was around 2000 when we purchased a pretty large amount of water capacity. And prior to that, we had a water distribution goal that said, a certain percentage of houses would be less than 1,000 square feet, a certain percentage of houses would be between 1,000 and 2,500, and then a certain percentage over 2,500, kind of. Is that legal? Is that legal to do, to say that a development of 500 houses, 10% of them have to be less than 1,200 square feet? Smaller house.
Sometimes I'll just have to admit that I don't know. I don't know that I think I've seen similar things in comprehensive plans with regard to if we talked about diversity of housing stock, which is one of the things in your advice that you've received today, no one finds that objectionable. Diversity of housing stock. We want to have some smalls, some mediums, and large. I don't know that you cross a legal line by defining what you mean.
I guess that's another option.
Yeah.
And that's in your plan, the diversity of stock.
Yeah, one of the goals of our plan here is to be a little bit high level because of where we are with the town of Rolesville. There are communities where we have, really deep dives into strategies and implementation, and we think that based on where Rolesville is, we're at a stage of kind of figuring out what those goals are. And obviously we established them in the strategic plan. We see some diversity of housing stock, and I think it's 2 of the different goals there. And so really kind of thinking about what that is, as opposed to kind of coming in and saying, we think this is what your zoning should look like. This is what, now we're happy to kind of engage in those conversations if you'd like to hear them. And look into legal ramifications. I've certainly encountered minimum livable square footage in zoning codes. I can't remember off the top of my head maximum square footage off the top of my head encountering much of that. But I will say one other thing, and this is maybe a little bit kind of a tangent to what we're talking about here, but the way the zoning code is currently structured is we're very, almost all of the, in fact, it is all of the low density residential zone, again, takes up 60% of all zoned land in the area, has, established what those, with the restrictions that are there, the lot sizes, things we talked about. Anything that fits in that kind of by right is permissible. When you look at those the more dense, and one of those is still only single family detached permissions, but then that high residential, we've established these conditional zones on top of almost all of that land, which essentially does some of, I think, what we're talking about, but kind of in the opposite, which is to say that anything that would be permitted by right, any landowner, I think in the city, if I'm remembering correctly, it says any landowner, I'm not sure exactly if it's within that zone or not, can propose that the commissioners consider that even something that would be a by right allowable structure can be voted on to be rejected. So it's in some sense, what we've done is we're very, very kind of permissive on the largest structures, but when we come to an area where maybe we think about smaller homes or something like that, as it's currently written, the zoning code says that any landowner could come in and say, this thing that the zoning would permit in all other situations, I think it shouldn't be permissible, and bring it to the town to make a determination about that. Now that kind of dampens, the possibilities of thinking about things that are, again, permitted by right in those zones, in those few zones that there are, and kind of dampens the opportunities to even kind of go to the maybe prospective limits about what is already permissible there. There's a lot of opportunities to continue at the status quo with the existing map, and that seems, to be frank, that's written in. It seems to be part by design, and so admittedly, what some of the ideas we're talking about would be a shift in the current approach to housing for the town, which again just goes back to this notion about trying to figure out understanding that there's demand, understanding where we are now, that we're expecting continued growth. How do we want to prepare for that? How do we want to manage for that? And making sure that we're on the same page. So then when, if we have a big public engagement around establishing this consensus, this vision, these goals, then somebody comes according to the zone and says, I don't want this thing that the zoning code would permit, please reconsider. We can say, we worked on this together. We established these goals. This is what we're working towards. This is what we're working towards as a town, and have that kind of process in place so we are on the same page about where we want to go and how we're moving there.
Any other question, board, planning board? Well, I think Meredith, you and the planning board in April got some things that you want now, and you got to go and wrap up this this plan and get it to us. When do you think it'll be finalized? Sometime mid-spring, something like that? Or?
Oh no, well, it's my hope that we will have the draft to post for public comment by the end of the month, potentially, for a 30-day comment period. There's a couple things, I was just reviewing it this morning. There's a couple, adjustments we want to make before we get a finalized draft for you. But we're pretty close. I do want to talk specifically about some more zoning stuff, because I do think that's something worth discussing a little bit further. And so we'll make some adjustments. It was my hope to have it for you by the end of this week, but maybe the end of the month, maybe a week or two in December, we can open up that public comment period and see what comes of that. And then we'll work towards a final plan.
All right. Well, thank you. Meredith, anything you want to make sure we don't miss before we wrap up?
Just one thing to clarify. I think one of the planning board members asked about where we would be finding the draft housing plan to review. And we'd like to do a web page on the town website, or have a link from the main page there, so it'll be easy for people to find.
Very good. And we'll make sure we get in newsletters and stuff like that. Talk to Candace about that. But thank you, Aaron. Thank you,
so much
Ben. Appreciate you guys coming out. Have a safe trip back when you head back.
Tomorrow morning.
All right. Have a safe trip back.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item, I think, is everybody good? Or we need to take a break. Everybody good right now? Okay. Meredith, I think next item is you, Land Development Ordinance, LDO, upcoming text amendments. Are you doing that?
I am trying to figure out how to make the other one go away. There we go. Magic. Yes, upcoming text amendments. We have a list to talk about. And the first one is in section 3, our zoning section of the Land Development Ordinance, residential dimensional standards and potential for new zoning districts. And that relates to the conversation we were just having about housing affordability. And it also stems from a lot of inquiries, I would say a lot, meaning I think I have 5 to 6 from local developers and national builders asking if we would consider decreasing setbacks or adding some different options. And from listening to the discussion this evening, I think I heard some mixed opinions on what might be a good path forward. But I guess what I'm looking for from you all this evening on potential new zoning districts or looking at residential dimensional standards, would you all be willing for staff, planning staff, to take a deeper dive into that and analyze what we have and give you a presentation on potential gaps and see if you're interested in pursuing any of those or not? So just don't jump into a text amendment yet. Do a little bit of a study and bring it back for the planning board and the town board to take a look at. Is that
Data is
something you-
always good.
Works.
The next one, infill development within the Main Street corridor. We actually already talked about that at the September 17th work session. That was one that was inspired by the Joel Fund. And as they move forward with their center on East is it West Young?
West
Street?
Young.
West Young, thank you. West Young, when you have a small piece of property like that and you have to put a 25-foot buffer with a wall, is that reasonable in downtown? And we talked about that. And Mayor Kern, you said you thought it would be reasonable for staff to take a look at performance standards that could be applied in places like downtown. So in situations like that, when there are smaller lots, redevelopment and fill, are there other options that we could meet the intent of buffering without taking up so much space? So in the same area. For section 4.
And let me ask
Okay.
a question on that.
Certainly.
So we're required to do it even if the adjoining landowners don't particularly matter to them?
That is correct. And I think the buffers we have in place are very suburban in nature and really meant for brand new subdivisions that are being built, which we have plenty of those. And it's nice to have some landscaping and possibly walls or fences in certain situations. But, in a downtown area with the smaller lots, it just doesn't make as much sense.
Mm-hmm.
And since the LDO, to answer your question, since the LDO states the perimeter buffer is this type of buffer between this district and that district, yes, we have to enforce that.
I should mention, it doesn't need to be that way. That's the way the board currently has it.
Yeah, I guess no situations is the exact same.
Right.
In this situation, it's about 300 feet or something. It's very long, and it's very much not needed.
Mhm.
And I don't think nobody really feels like it's needed, but, we're required, it's in the requirement to do it. And,
It's worth looking at.
Hmm?
It's worth looking at to see how we can adjust it.
But in another case, it may be 100 foot and it needs it,
Right.
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 So,
Some case is different.
every situation is a little bit different. But our rules is our rules, I think, is what you're saying, Meredith. The rule is the rule.
Like our attorney said, yes, we can bring forward a text amendment to make some changes. From our planning staff discussions, we've been talking about creating a list of performance standards. And if you can meet these performance standards, however you want to meet them or get creative with that, and doesn't take up as much space, if we can figure out what that is, we're wondering if that would be a reasonable approach.
Could be good. Performance standards.
Maybe have some feedback from the adjoining property owners as well.
That's a great idea.
Some may want the existing standards, some may not.
Mm-hmm.
We'll keep working on that one. And in section 4 of our LDO, it includes overlay districts. And I got a proposal from our planning board member, Derek Verstegen. And he sent some ideas and talked about them with me. And I've shared those with our town attorney and gotten some initial feedback. Derek was throwing out the concept of, with riparian buffers, is there a way to limit development adjacent to a riparian buffer? So, I think it was inspired by some of our recent conditional rezoning case discussions about concerns with stormwater runoff. So Derek was saying, what if we had less intense development adjacent to the riparian buffer for a certain area and then transition into full-fledged development? And our town attorney has shared with me that we need to take a look at case law and see what's legal there, because I know there were some changes, like 10, 15 years ago, where you you used to be allowed to extend that and then you couldn't. So I think we have to make sure we're following the rules there.
Yeah, that's the way I remember it, Dave. Because we used to, at one time, Rolesville required 100 foot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the state says you can't require no more than what we require. You can't add to it.
Correct.
in a requirement. Now,
So you
there's
you
maybe
can't-
other ways to do it, but in a requirement.
and that it would be the other ways that we'd be looking into.
Right.
There are other purposes other than riparian buffer for which a buffer could be created, and that is something that some communities have done. I have not kept up on how well those have held up to additional challenges by property owners or by developers when, rather than extending the riparian buffer, you have a riparian, but wherever you have a riparian buffer, you add a recreational buffer around it. Well, that's not a riparian buffer, that's a recreational buffer. And how those have held up to challenge. And that's something we need to look at.
Yeah.
And Derek also brought up the idea to planning staff about creating historic districts for the Perry Street neighborhood and the Jonesville community. And Chapter 160D sets out specific procedures for implementing historic districts. So we'd have to take a look at that, and that would probably be its own project if that was something the planning board and you all were interested in us going forward with.
That's a good idea. Especially with the area of Jonesville. That's a good idea.
And we would need to form a historic preservation commission, which could be its own group or could be a part of an existing body.
That's right.
Don't we already have
several
historic
steps.
preservation?
Hmm?
Don't we already have a historic preservation committee?
We, talking about a house on the register or something?
No, don't we already have a group of people, a committee, a historic preservation committee?
I don't think we have it in the town. I don't think, we have the one
We
connected to the library and stuff
Okay.
maybe, but not one in,
Okay.
not one in town.
Mhm.
That I'm aware, I don't think so.
So just something to think about.
Not officially, maybe think about something informal.
And then Derek shared some thoughts on downtown, which tend to fit more into a project type mode versus a text amendment to our land development ordinance. However, let's hold that thought, and when we get to the signage within the Main Street corridor discussion, we can come back to that. Section 5 of our LDO is all about uses.
Well, before you move on,
sure.
I mean, we doing jointly with these guys here. Anything y'all want to add, Derek? Anything you want to, add to that? I know, you're welcome to say anything you want. You're part of the meeting here, so anything you want to add, feel free to do that as we move on. Because y'all part of the group, so you're gonna have to come up. You're gonna.
I could talk to the 3 points, obviously extensively because I submitted them. But if there are specific questions about what they entail, I'm happy to address at least where my thoughts were going. In a very succinct sense, the environmental idea was really just to find a way to restrict the density of any kind of development that was going there, not necessarily to extend it like we used to be able to, but instead of having single family or townhomes coming right up to the established riparian buffers, the idea is to have a zoning area that doesn't allow that kind of house, but might have to require a 1 acre or half acre single family. So there's a transition of product from the more sensitive environmental areas into the more dense areas. That's the general consensus of what I was trying to address with the environmental concept. Historical was really just initially to be just something that we overlay on something so that we can then figure out what we're going to do with it, but is also something that I was tying into, in an odd sense, they're not here anymore, but in an odd sense, a form of affordability housing, in the sense that the historical district, aside from assigning it wherever we feel it's appropriate, those finite communities or those finite properties would also be subject to a lot of town policies that made housing more affordable the longer they stay there. So if your family name owns a property for 25, 50, 75 years, then you incrementally get policies that favor you by discounting you on
things like recreation park fee, recreation fees, or taxes, tax credits, just some way to allow you the means to stay in that property because you're part of the history, because you've been here for so many years, and incentivize it by reducing your cost of living there through town incentive tax credits, cost reductions, water discounts, whatever kinds of stuff is what was detailed in that. And then as far as the downtown district, as Meredith talked about, it was, and I think I've seen, you guys might have, some of you have already seen this because I've shared it last year, was creating this kind of visual concept so that you know where downtown is when you get there because of various different kinds of appearance-related projects being implemented. So that's what the three of them are. I don't know if anybody has any questions about them. I'm happy to answer specifically where I was going with them.
Anything to add, guys? I do know on the, go ahead. I do know on the downtown thing, Derek, well, kind of where we're at with that. I know it has been gone to the, Michael's kind of been working more closely with that because of downtown groups and stuff. But basically, there was no way to make it part of the project, so it's going to be addressed once we get Main Street, whatever that is. I think we'll do a study on it. So that's kind of been put on hold till Main Street's done.
Fair enough.
But the other two things, I hadn't heard the environmental thing. I guess the biggest thing between environmental buffer and a regular extending the riparian buffer, you can't do anything in it at all. But I guess this recreational buffer, you probably could. Do
well, if I'm understanding the town attorney's perspective of bringing that up, I mean, that's creating a recreational buffer is essentially not allowing anything else to happen in there, keeping it for recreational purpose, whether it's natural trails, hiking, or whatever, and not building anything in there, which I would certainly favor that over this idea. But this idea was really just saying, we're not stopping you from building in there. We're just saying you can't build the same type of product that you have in a cluster, townhome, apartment type of thing. This buffer around all our blue streams would have no clear cutting allowed into that space, only selective cutting enough to put the property, put the structure in place. Those type of things is what I was looking at for something like that. So you're not restricting building, you're just restricting the type of building to preserve as much of the natural environment in that buffer as possible.
Thank you.
And I can identify no legal concern with that. If an LDO had enough folks identifying enough creative synapses, you can pretty much craft it as you like. So you could have a single zoning district, which has a presumptive minimum lot size, and under certain conditions, minimum lot size can be larger or smaller. We currently have that already in many suburban districts where corner lots have to be bigger because of the side yard maximum. I can't identify any reason why you couldn't have a RM zoning, medium density residential district that had 6 or 8 or 10,000 square feet as your minimum lot size, but for any portion of the lot, any lot that is in any way within X number of feet of a statutory riparian buffer has to have a minimum lot size of X plus or X times 1.2. If you can do the math and create it in an objective way that doesn't target a particular person or taxpayer, then sure, absolutely.
And that's exactly what that idea is focused on doing.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that, Derek. Back to you then. Number 5, I think.
Number 5, Section 5 in our ordinance is about uses. And our unified development ordinance that preceded the land development ordinance allowed government facilities in all zoning districts. And our land development ordinance allows government facilities or public facilities in non-residential zoning districts. So we were having a discussion in one of our planning staff meetings recently, and we wondered if you all would be interested in allowing government facilities or public facilities in all zoning districts. For example, if there needed to be a fire station or a police substation or some other town facility in a residential zoning district, is that reasonable? Since we used to have it, I don't know if it was left out intentionally or not.
We need
I
that.
would say yes.
Yes, because that will decrease the response
You need that.
time. Right, right, Chief?
Substations to EMS then,
Mhm.
RFD.
Just to save that sort of development some time and so they would not have to go through a rezoning.
Right. Now, would that include schools?
No. That's a separate use. So if that is something you were interested in us looking at, we could certainly look at that as well.
Yeah, because especially private schools can get controversial.
Oh, yes, sir, we can.
I think you got your answer on that.
Sounds good. Planning staff have met several times with the appearance committee of the Rolesville Downtown Development Association. And that group has brought forward an idea that they would love to see more cohesion with signage in downtown. And I said I could bring that to the joint work session to see what the interest is there. And I know Commissioner Paul and Mayor Curran, you were at that meeting where we came and talked with the RDDA. And one thought staff had would be to create entry features or downtown columns that sort of aligns with some of Derek's ideas as well in certain key points in downtown, and or signage in downtown. New signage in downtown could include, certain colors or a downtown emblem. That was something the appearance committee thought of as well. They're like, could we have some kind of downtown emblem that we could have for people to put on their signs just to tie an area together visually?
I think it's a great idea.
Is there a cost share with that?
I know the RDDA is working on, or maybe they just brought forward the facade improvement grant program. And with something like that, you could certainly
Use those
apply to
funds,
get
yeah.
some funds to update signage if an existing business wanted to update or.
I've been asking the town manager to talk about how we can utilize digital technology and IT technology for the signage as well in different areas. Is that kind of what you're leaning into as well? How do you have signs in different parts of Walbrook and Cobblestone, connecting the two, having a unified look? Is that what you're referring to specifically?
That is what this group is interested in. It doesn't mean everything has to match, but something to let you know that you're in another visual cue that you're in downtown.
Digitalized as good as, or are we trying to keep it with a logo, if you will? Like I'm kind of.
Not, it hasn't really been defined yet.
Okay.
So one suggestion I would offer for distinguishing downtown from a logo perspective is basically to take the same logo exercise that we had here, however many years ago that was, and just take the second place logo, which was basically this color theme in a maroon, and just put the word downtown underneath it. And then that way you have you maintain your branding everywhere you're going, and you're just changing your color. And if we do anything along the other stuff that I've talked about in that proposal, then that whole maroon color would match everything in that whole area. So you're still coming in, but all your street signs would go from the bluish pastel colors to the maroon colors once you enter that area. So you're still maintaining your identity. You're not creating something new for somebody to figure out where I am or where something different. Is this still Rolesville? Because the logo is the same, it's just a different color palette. That would be my suggestion for that. And then taking the motto at the bottom and just put downtown. And that would just be as easy as you could do it, pretty quickly, painless, and no cost.
So this is limited just to signs, though.
Their approach was signage. It doesn't mean there aren't other ideas that you all have that could be combined with the effort.
Because I think
It could encompass, for example, facade.
that's what I'm wondering.
Some way to make that cohesive, either within a strip or the whole downtown or something. Some way to, one, distinguish our town, much like Derek's talking about, and two, just to provide some sense of uniformity within the buildings and among the buildings. So that,
Because you mentioned colors.
Could be colors, could be
colors
materials.
is more than a sign, though.
right.
Like a sheets.
Right.
Having a sheet sign is and the rest of it the same, it ain't no, you ain't accomplish anything. But, it'd have to be more than the sign, I guess, to really. And I don't think we never had a theme. Maybe that's something to think of too. You know, we've been known for granite.
Yes, definitely.
That is true.
You know, we've been known for granite, so if these buildings have granite designs in them a little bit, that would be a good theme, you know, rather than red brick, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and it's not that much more expensive, I don't think, but, you know, if you're going to do it, you know, maybe expand your thinking a little bit.
Sure.
Especially on Main Street, if we're talking about Main Street, you know. I mean, if you took, you know, Granite Falls Swim Club, I mean, it's a nice looking building for granite that they have, you know, mixed in with everything else, you know.
The next item, I've already mentioned performance standards for perimeter buffers. That ties back to the infill development piece, but also I've had some cases recently where, as the land development administrator, I've made the interpretation that it's better to keep existing trees rather than cut them down and replant a specific buffer with a wall in it. Because if you have to build a wall, you're going to kill the existing trees. So there have been a few cases recently where there's been environmental features and or quite a distance between the property line and where the residential lots are going. And I've allowed, or I've stated that the intent of the buffer has been met based on the distance and the environmental features and the existing trees. But it, you know, it'd be cleaner to have that in writing and as a text amendment.
Sounds good.
And then one thing from Eddie Henderson and our Parks and Recreation team, they do our Tree City application each year. And one of the comments that came back from Tree City USA last year was the applicability of your tree ordinance needs to be clarified. So we have a one sentence statement that's recommended by that group to put in our ordinance. And I imagine that you all would be good with all that, so we could keep our Tree City status, but I just wanted to bring it up because that's something we need to officially do.
Did we ever stand up a board, a tree board?
We're in process.
Yes.
We're still in
It's
We have all of our questions and everything ready. We're just interviewing now, so. Process. Yep.
and that's you know, stems from the Parks and Rec Advisory Board.
Oh, that's where it's coming from?
Yep.
Not the planning board?
Also from assistance from Planning and Public Works when needed. That's what we talked about.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the last one, right now, there is an active notice of violation on a residential property owner who erected an 8-foot fence between their lot and another lot. And it's not in a new subdivision. It's in like a, you know, just a residential area that's not a subdivision per se. And the property owner, upon receiving the notice of violation letter, first asked if he could do a variance. And, you know, a variance through the Board of Adjustment has very clear criteria that have to be proven. And I think that would be very difficult in this case. And so he came back and said, would you all consider a text amendment to allow an 8-foot fence in some residential areas? For example, it could be in areas that are not in subdivisions, like rural residential areas or single lots or lots near commercial areas or something to that effect. Another thought that staff came up with, if the 8-foot fence is in a topographically lower area, you might need the extra height to get the same effect, depending on what the grade of the land is. That's just something, I don't know if you all would find that something worth considering or not. I just wanted to share what was going on there.
So what is our height now?
Right now, residential fence cannot exceed 6 feet.
It's what?
6 feet.
6 feet, so you couldn't do a 7 then, anything? I mean, I can look over a 6-foot fence pretty easy. I'm not sure if you want to put one up, 6 feet, 6 foot wouldn't do much good. Some people, maybe most people, but not some people. I don't know, it's up to you. What is the height they put up, 8?
This person put up an 8-foot fence.
Is there opposition to it?
Yes, their neighbor would like to know when the fence is coming down. So like I said, that there's an active notice of violation. However, this property owner is not ignoring the notice of violation. He's trying to pursue other avenues. So I was just looking to.
So,
for that.
Can cut the fence down to 6 feet.
so you don't have to do a fence permit, anything like
We
that?
don't do fence permits.
But we do have regulations on how high.
Our ordinance has regulations, so no fence permit required. But if you build one, it's supposed to follow what's in the land development ordinance. And obviously, a complaint came in on this one.
Is the type of fencing a factor too? Do we detail that as opposed to open picket versus closed solid
There's some
panel fencing?
material requirements in the LDO. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head.
Because that impacts like just visually, how it looks from the outside versus what the purpose is. If the purpose is to shield something like a commercial entity that's next door, that's one thing. But if it's just to, piss off your neighbor, it's another. So, I think understanding we can't just, in other words, what I'm saying is I wouldn't want us to just say, yeah, you can allow 8-foot fences. Because then you can have basically this big brick wall sitting there, versus 1-inch picket aluminum fencing or something that you can still see through, but it still serves a purpose to separate and secure the area, for instance.
I have a couple questions about that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Derek.
Does not the HOA determine what style of fence or fencing is allowed in each neighborhood?
Yeah, this particular case, it's not in an HOA.
It's in just a regular house on.
It's a regular house
and
on a piece of property, older home.
And today we have something in place, as I saw, 6 feet is the height.
Yes.
And we have no limitations around material. We have the 6 feet as a height.
We have,
Because I didn't see anything with materials in here specifically. So.
I was thinking we did have some material restrictions. I just don't remember I can look them up.
I do. Have we ever gone over 6 feet?
In commercial areas.
Oh, residential, have we ever gone?
Residential, not that I'm aware of.
Have we ever gone lower or shorter?
I thought it was always 7. I don't know why it's 7, 6'8" is kind of a normal visual thing. I mean,
My last question, is there a standardized height in municipalities today that other communities are doing, or has been standardized?
Could certainly look into that. I know a standard 6-foot fence is pretty standard panel wise. Dave looks like he wants to say something.
Very much so.
Every zoning ordinance has some paragraphs on fences. Rolesville's is super brief. Many other communities have pretty detailed different heights and stay under here in your front yard, but you can go higher if it's open, as Derek pointed out, and there's some granularity to that. 8 feet is high, but Raleigh has a provision to allow for an 8-foot fence under certain conditions.
Especially if you're near a
Not sure they would help this out.
commercial development, then I know in Raleigh you can have 8-foot fence to separate as a buffer. But I'm looking at in hours right now, and 6.5 delta to see, and I want to see the height of 6 feet.
I see street walls. I think it's under section 3.4 maybe.
Okay,
Street walls.
I see that.
we haven't we haven't looked anywhere else.
But I guess my question, the reason why I'm going there with that is I'm trying to make sure that someone's coming back to us later on saying, hey, you guys haven't been specific enough, to your point. Sure. And then secondly, if we're talking about a 6-foot fence that is standardized in other municipalities, I'd like for us to leverage that, because it's been done before. But if it's less than, and also material. Now, what I heard you say about commercial, I mean, can we write that in specifically? The language stating that if it's only exception would be if you're behind or up to a commercial entity, we could write that in as part of the whole process, correct? Thank you.
I would suggest to the board that there is probably room to revisit our fence ordinance.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that a revisit to adopt all of the goals that have just been stated at this work session would help this particular landowner in any way. Because it sounds as though this landowner was aware before they completed the fence that they completed it anyway. And it sounds as though there may be a neighbor involved in this. So the sort of, you can go to 8 feet so long as it isn't offensive, or it's set back from your property line, or it's made of an open construction. I don't know that any of those features apply to this case. But it certainly would still potentially be an improvement to our ordinance.
Meredith, I found it is in 6.5 under fences, walls, and berms.
Okay.
And it talks about the materials of it being constructed in high-quality materials, including bricks and stones, stucco, over concrete, masonry, block treated wood, etc. Aluminum and iron, either choice. But the height is 6 feet.
Does that cover all the materials one could use?
All others are prohibited, is what it says.
Yeah, I would say do a little checking around.
Okay.
I think a good place to check is Stanford Creek Greenway, because there's a bunch of fences down that greenway. And I don't know, it seemed like to me they're more than 6 foot high. Some of them may be, but
I was actually on that greenway today for a little bit, checking something else out.
but you know, if you've been down there, it's a lot of fences, iron fences, you know, wood fences.
Are there any particular things that have been suggested here that staff should run with? Ideas about height or material or setback or open construction that sound like no-brainer good ideas the staff should bring forward?
I think the only thing when we talk about fences, you don't have to have a permit, so people build them, you know, have a wrinkly they want to, or whatever. Because I've seen some didn't stay up very long. But I do think, Dave, fences that's part of a association, or we require them to put it in for purposes, they need to be, we got some holes in maintaining them. You know, HOA maintaining them or whatever. Because my understanding is, from experience I've had recently, if it's not in writing when the homeowners association signs on to that, what their responsibilities are, if that fence is in there, they're not going to maintain it. Legally, they don't have to my understanding.
Potentially, they wouldn't be able to. So whatever
yeah, that's right.
Whatever the covenants provide and the bylaws potentially provide would be the scope of the authority that the association has to spend money on. So that's one thing. And the other is some developments in Rolesville have fences that were built at the design election of the developer, but were not mandated by any town ordinance. In that case, at least as a legal matter, the fence could deteriorate and fall down, and the only legal town concern there would be the health hazard portion of that not being safe. But if they don't want to have a fence anymore, that wasn't a requirement.
I think where I stand on it is it was put there for a reason to buffer, like, say Donnie lives next to a new neighborhood. It was put there to buffer the neighbor, but it's no control over it. I mean, once, you know, there's no control over it. And once it falls down, then he's out of luck. You know?
So if the fence was constructed as a condition of a special use permit or as a conditional zoning or as a site plan, then it would be enforceable against the property owner that was required to have the fence. So that is going to be an obligation of the residential property owner, or if they can pass that on to their HOA. But in that case, yes, the town could enforce the maintenance of that because it is a land use regulation running with that land. Yes, absolutely.
We just have to be careful, we just have to be very careful, make sure it's in the conditions or something.
Correct. Because sometimes they're just built because that was what was decided as a design choice at the time. Correct.
That's the only other thing I've heard about fences is, because sometimes they're put on private property. You know, it's not a homeowner association
Correct.
buffer there. They're just put on 5 properties, and that's where it gets iffy on, if it falls down, nobody puts it back up, you know. I don't know, y'all heard anything else on fences while we on it?
They make good neighbors.
As long as they're
I've
not
heard that.
put high.
I've heard that.
I thought the higher the better, but maybe not, you know. What else?
Being in a HOA, I'll keep my comments to myself.
Safer that way.
That is it for the upcoming text amendment list.
Okay. So next section, you go in this section too, the walkability, density, and dimension standards discussion. We've been 2 hours exactly. I know April took a break already, but do we want to keep going or take a break? Up to you guys. You good?
Okay.
Let's keep
Up to
going
y'all.
then. Y'all good?
Well, I have some sad news about this presentation this evening. Tanner Hazlett, Planner 1 with the Planning Department, has been doing all the work on this. I spent the last month like really digging in and thinking about things, and he prepared this presentation and was going to present it this evening. However, he is under the weather. So, disappointed. I know he was excited. I know Commissioner Long, you got to spend a little time with Tanner at the Rolesville Public Officials. Same with you, Mayor Curran. He's great. He's really enthusiastic. And it's great to have the recent college graduate energy injected into some discussion sometimes, because I don't remember what that feels like. So hopefully I'll do Tanner justice this evening, but he put a lot of heart into this. So I'm sorry he's not here to talk with you all or participate in the discussion. So walkability. Since I've been in Rolesville, I've heard walkability come up with the town board and the planning board when it comes to townhomes most. You know, I've heard you all say townhomes should be in a walkable location, or any kind of higher density residential should be in a walkable location, meaning, and I took that definition as walkability is close to services. So, Tanner prepared this slide. I like this concept that measures how easy, safe, and enjoyable, I like enjoyable, it is to walk around a city neighborhood or street. It's based on the idea that people should be able to access essential services. That matches up with what I've heard from you all over the past 3+ years. So as we're talking about the definition of walkability, what am I missing? Time, okay. You know, like a 5-minute walk, a 10-minute walk.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think we need to incorporate some sort of understanding of distance. It doesn't have to be from a center point like traditionally things are, the center of Young and Main, but whether it's one measure, we have the downtown corridor is that whole stretch. If you say walkable is within, and I don't mean straight line, I mean planned sidewalks, proposed greenways, at a pace of 2 miles an hour, you should be able to get somewhere walkable within an hour there and back. Define some sort of standard, like what is reasonable to think that somebody of any varying kind of able condition can walk comfortably up and down the terrain that we might have in the town, you know, can get somewhere and back, whether it's in whatever form they need, if any, of assistance, right? Is it an hour? Is that walkable? Do you think that's, I mean, does it make sense?
That seems pretty big
30
to me.
minutes? I think that's what we need to decide as a town, is say, what is walkable anywhere within an established infrastructure system, right? Sidewalks, greenways, within an hour.
I think one of the things that I get confused on, and I hear from citizens, is when they hear the word walkability, they think of the downtown area. Everything is around a central area. And so what I think we get tied into is, are we trying to make everything walkable to our downtown area? Are we just talking about walking to essentials or walking to amenities? And I think that's what we need to get clarity on is, to your point, is are we talking about walkable to the Main Street corridor area, or are we talking walkable to amenities? And I think most citizens are thinking walkable to the downtown Main Street corridor as being walkable, or that would be the walkable areas that they're looking at. So if I'm looking from that perspective, when we don't have a lot of neighborhoods to do that, right? So is that where I'm hearing you say define what's 10, 20 minutes based upon, this rate of speed, et cetera, et cetera?
At any given location across our downtown corridor. That's from Jonesville and Main Street all the way up to, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's considered the walkable part of the town. Everything else is outskirts.
And that's what I'm suggesting. We have to define those two things. Is that what we're going to say? Is that's what we're talking about? And then are we talking about a distance and time that most able-bodied people or people with any sort of assistive technology can manage within a certain amount of time?
I think we need to determine the first one first.
We got to do both, I think.
We can determine, we come to a consensus on what's considered walkable or where the walkability central point is. I think we're batting it out. I personally don't know. So I'd like to hear from a consensus what that looks like.
And the one thing I just want to add is to remember that all of our communities, as they come on board, have to have sidewalks. So if we have any kind of community that has a commercial entity included in it, it's naturally going to be walkable because we're not talking about 500-acre developments here, right? Perfect example is Preserve at Mitchell Mill, right? That's a mixed community with townhomes and single family and a commercial entity. That commercial entity is walkable to almost anybody down there, right? But that neighborhood will not be walkable to the ABC store, for instance, until the greenways get put in, but it still might meet that if the proposed greenway was put in place or a sidewalk was all the way from Jonesville, Main Street, all the way down, jumping crazily over the bypass or some other way, right, to that whole area, then the southern part of that corridor becomes walkable, and that whole place satisfies that definition.
And that's a great job that the Parks and Rec Department have done.
Thank you.
Was to make sure that we get a chance to gather everything together. So the amenities and walkability, especially with the developments of mixed uses that we have coming aboard now.
So I guess we're looking for definitions. So kind of
Just to clarify.
Clarify. Let's be clear so we can.
So I have a question. So you said in that you when what you were talking about said townhouses.
That is an impression I got early in my career here in Rolesville. That seemed to be where walkability was coming up at the town board meetings when trying to decide if townhomes were reasonable in certain locations.
I remember that.
And that may not be the right definition. Early on in my career, I was taught walkable means a quarter mile. That's just
I think if you look at downtown parking things, they put the 5-minute rule on most things. I mean, if it's over 5 minutes, you're not gonna walk. So depends on if you're going for a leisure walk, you're probably gonna walk more than 5 minutes. But if you're going to park somewhere, you're not gonna park 15 minutes away. This doesn't make sense. So it's kind of definition applies to kind of your purpose. So where do you need? You need a team to look at this, or you need a?
I think we don't have to answer the questions tonight. Maybe a team if we want to come up with what does walkable mean to Rolesville, or how do we use that term in the context of the rezoning cases that the planning board and the town board look at and evaluate, and how does that help us? Or is that something we want to bring into our policy and our comprehensive plan update if we're missing it, or we may have what we need with our bike and greenway plans.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe you could get input from the downtown committee, what do they think? That's what we call Main Street as being walkable. So what does that mean?
To
And
give
maybe
us a
Parks
definition.
and Rec, because they probably got a little different spin on what walkable is, you
Right.
know?
I'm someone who loves to walk, so if I have connections, pedestrian connections, sidewalks, greenways to get different places, sure, I might walk for an hour, like Derek said, but
Yeah,
if
and
I'm
this-
going
this-
grocery
this is
shopping, I don't
good.
really want to walk an hour.
This is good then.
I had a neighbor that uses a scooter to do his grocery shop. Got a car in his garage, but he just jump on his scooter, electric scooter into town and
Golf carts. Yeah, it's good.
I know Raleigh's got them little scooters everywhere, you know?
We'll do golf carts.
We can, keep,
Meredith,
oh.
this is really good.
what's the density
Definition,
piece
yeah.
or the walkability,
Walkability,
the
yes,
definition that's in there?
yes.
We can keep going with that. And that, I think it matches what's pretty close to what's in the first bullet. Let's see. One thing that Tanner wanted to bring up with everybody when thinking about walkability and creating great places was being able to walk to your third place. And is that a term everyone's familiar with? Third place is, I guess, one of my third places is a restaurant called Chow that's walkable from my house. And when I go in there, the bartender knows my name and knows I like Pinot Noir and that I like chicken wings. So,
Friends.
having a place like that where you feel at home, that's not your home.
That's a
so-
Cheers place.
Yeah, exactly. So someplace like that, going to Sipnoshery, they, how they put the notes on your sandwiches and salads and, know your name, that feels good. So being able to walk to places like that just adds to the enjoyable factor for walkability that Tanner mentioned.
That's good. I like that.
So just a concept Tanner wanted to bring forward this evening. And to build on to the definition of walkability, what are desired destinations that you'd want to walk to? What are those services, grocery stores, restaurants? Is there any other place that is missing from this list?
Just little shops.
Mhm.
Like our little shops. I don't see grocery stores just
Sure,
to
like
call
local
out.
charm or.
Yeah.
Of course, we all know walking is great for your mental and physical well-being, interaction. It's fun to walk down the sidewalk or walk someplace and recognize somebody and say hello. Again, that's another piece that makes you feel good. Tanner found this example of the Lowe's Foods on 401. I drive by it when I going to and from work. So this shopping center has a lot of great businesses. It's got a pharmacy, it's got a primary care office, it's got a dentist. You can buy your food, you can go to a restaurant, you can exercise, and there are different types of neighborhoods surrounding that. So he thought that was a cool example of being walkable to different services. And then the really fun part, I asked you all before to submit any communities or subdivisions that you would like us to investigate. Then we had a few repeats, and not everyone submitted suggestions, and I was actually grateful for that because that could take a really long time to go through all of it. But we have a few examples to walk you through to help build some context for walkability, density, and dimensional standards. Bedford at Falls River in Raleigh. Here are some photos of the different homes there. They have attached housing and detached housing, some larger lots, some smaller lots. And they have a town center that has a pizza place, some shopping, entertainment. And density-wise, or standard-wise, they have varying lot sizes from less than 5,000 square feet to more than 15,000. So that goes back to these pictures of some different housing pieces and parts in the same place. And they also, I guess there's multifamily acreage. So just a diverse housing mix, and I know Tanner thought that was a good example because he thought it was also a walkable community since you could walk to the town center. And said there were lots of community gathering spaces where you could interact with your neighbors.
Yeah, one thing interesting about Bedford Falls,
Mhm.
it's a nice neighborhood. I think it's a little bit ritzy though. It's a little high end.
Uh-huh.
And it must be by code, but looks like every house, the front door is connected to the sidewalk. And we don't have that in Rolesville.
No, we don't have that
think,
requirement.
it's very few
Very-
houses, just, the front door connects to the sidewalk.
So I think that goes to the recent college graduate enthusiasm and energy. To get excited about that new urbanist vibe where, like you said, it's rear loaded, so you get that better or increased pedestrian interface along the street because you're not interacting with vehicles as much. So yes, but you're right. The price points can definitely be higher. Another development that was on our list to investigate was Wendell Falls. And I imagine some of you have been there. I still have not been there, and I would like to go because I've heard people say it's pretty nice. I know they have a variety of housing types and some commercial areas as well. Coffee, bars, grocery, parks, not too far from Nightdale Station Park. Let's see. So the single family lot widths range from 34 to 55 feet. So that's definitely smaller than the lots we have in Rolesville. And the lot sizes are pretty small to townhome lots up to a third of an acre. And the density goes from 3 units per acre to 20 units per acre. So that's a big range in one community. But it's pretty large planned development.
Well, let's just stress this as, I think Mike brought up, going back and forth. This is before Linwood and Michael got on the board, but, the whole thing we changed, the thing had to do with drainage, that those small lots, y'all recall, that was the big thing, those small lots between the two houses so close together, they just don't drain. Right? Y'all remember all that? That's.
Yeah, I remember talking about the, we
And
had
I think they actually took you out and showed you where they didn't drain right.
yes, we had a field trip one time with a former.
Down by weight.
It was just, it was 401,
That's right, it was
5401. Yeah,
Yes.
54. Yeah.
went over there.
So, that's what you gotta, that's what led us to changing it back. That's what, it was coming from the planning board, at least one of them out there,
Right.
that small lots don't drain.
Well, from what I remember, I'm remembering it where the homeowners had done some modifications to the grading of their house with rocks and things, and that was causing, the one that I'm thinking of, it not to drain properly.
I wouldn't doubt.
Yeah, it all has to do with proper drainage and landscaping, so a small lot can be properly prepared so that it drains just as well as a large lot.
I know I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
So with the Merritt property rezoning that was approved 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago, they included a condition to provide detailed on-lot grading on their construction drawings, and that's not a requirement, but doing that, shows the commitment to making sure the drainage was good, because those are smaller lots due to the age-restricted standards that we have. So there are, different ways around it, but yes, we had lengthy discussions about the drainage between homes when they're
Yeah, and I
closer
think
together.
the biggest change, I believe, Paul, was the distance between the houses, the setback. We changed that drastically, I think, from like 3 foot to 10 foot or something like that. Do you remember?
Yeah.
So, that makes a lot.
Fire an issue with that too?
The what?
Fire was an issue with that?
Yeah, fire was talked about, but mostly it was drainage. Mostly it was drainage, though. The big thing had to do it.
Definitely something for us to keep in mind and see if we can make improvements there if we look at any changes to dimensional standards. One community that we had several requests to look at was Villages at Rolesville. And some nice looking homes there.
Nice plug for our
Oh.
town.
Of course, I think it's a great, we have lovely neighborhoods here in Rolesville.
Thanks.
So nearby, Tanner has Subway, Coffee Lodge. Okay, I don't know where Tuxedo Junction is. Is that something we've heard of? Grocery Food Lion. So the Villages has different lot sizes there for their 50-foot wide lots. They're 5,500 square feet, and the density is about 7 units per acre, probably a little less, because the density was determined here based on lot square footage. And for the 75-foot lot width, they're about 9,000 square feet, 0.2 acres, and probably, 3.5 to 4 units per acre. And I'm going down on the density because the infrastructure was not included in the density calculation. And that was done under the former R and PUD zoning and our UDO. Any thoughts on Villages at Rolesville and how that feels?
I wanted to see the Villages because I know that there are several different housing sizes and types there. So that one was of interest to me. Well, they all are, but I wanted to see that one specifically because I know that I could recognize, ride by and say, okay, that's that one and that's
Sure,
that one.
sure. That's the 50-foot lot and that's
Yeah.
the 75-foot lot. Or, 5,000 square feet versus 10,000 square feet. And I think the last one, we got a couple requests for Heritage East, another lovely neighborhood. And there are some shopping areas, because this one is too far from Wake Forest. The common lot width was 80 feet, and typical area was a little over 11,000 square feet. So those are quarter acre lots, and the density is probably 2.5 to 3 units per acre. And how does that one feel? Any different than the other ones we were looking at?
Price value.
Okay.
Well, it's a more expensive neighborhood, for sure.
What do you mean, how does that feel, Meredith?
How does, when we talk about density and dimensional standards, when you walk down a residential street or drive down a residential street, or do you feel like this is an attractive place, that this feels like a place I'd want to live?
I think once the trees mature, I think
Sure.
it makes a big difference.
So that's getting into landscape standards.
And you asked that question because why? Because the Villages, depending on who's walking down that street, they could think that 5,500 smaller home is like, oh my God, that's amazing. You know what I mean?
Sure, sure.
And so somebody else may think that Heritage East is amazing.
And that's cool.
So
That goes to diversity of housing.
Yeah, that's the only reason I say that is because of the diversity of housing and different price points and
The options you have.
yeah, for
So I guess the question is, are you saying which one of these feel better for us from that perspective, the diversity of housing or the affluency of the housing?
Gosh, I think maybe to help support our strategic plan that has a goal of diversifying our housing mix, I guess I'm hoping that we'd get positive feedback on all of the examples, because like you were saying, Mayor Pro Tem Sneed, depending on who you are, you might be like, oh my gosh, this 5,500 square foot lot feels like home to me.
Right.
And someone else is like, nope, I gotta have a quarter acre lot.
so that begs the question, that brings up the question of what are the majority of the homes in Rolesville and what do we already have enough of?
Sure, and that's
That's what makes me think. It makes me think of, and who else do we need to be catering to besides those people in the $700,000-800,000 homes? Because-
Are we changing the conversation from walkability to housing types now? I'm just trying to follow along, because I
Sure.
thought this was I thought this was a walkability conversation about these are the different kinds of communities that show how walkable they are. and now we're switching it to housing types.
I think you changed the density, didn't you?
Sure, which density? I think maybe I could have given a better introduction because Mayor Pro Tem Sneed and I have been talking about having this discussion, since the spring,
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, wow.
early
Yeah.
spring?
I think she moved to
And we
density.
came up with these items as ones that would be good for the planning board and the town board to have a conversation about together, just to see where there are differing opinions or differing viewpoints, and, to help us do the best job possible when reviewing rezoning applications. So we understand, the different viewpoints. And did I do okay with that? Am I missing something? I probably should have said that in the beginning, like, why are we talking about this? Because that was something that we collaborated on for back and forth for several months, trying to figure out what, because we can't talk about everything in one night. So what do we want to bring to the table that seems to come up a lot during rezoning cases?
I had one thing I'd like to say, looking at these different housing types, and I think the UDO now, my opinion, at least, with the requirement of sidewalks, it kind of lends itself to the walkability. I think the neighborhoods are very walkable amongst ourselves to the amenities that are being provided in greenway trails that Parks and Rec has approved. And I think as more things get developed, you'll see more connection to the town and to some future, sites that'll be put in more grocery stores and other convenience areas. But I think all of these plans, I think, have something to offer, because I don't think there's not any one house for everybody. I mean, that's why we've got all these different types. And I think that, like the Villages and Heritage East, to me, I see them, they look like bigger lots, but part of it is because of the setbacks when those were approved. Those houses are pushed a lot further back. Mayor Curran made a comment about we didn't have a lot of lots that had sidewalks to connect to the roads. In Meredith's slide, it actually had the front setbacks in the Bedford at Falls River. I think a lot of those are 10-foot setbacks. So they were encouraging those houses to be pushed more forward. So they have more backyard than front yard, and a lot of those are alley lows, cars are in the back. So it gives a cleaner look, and it just gives a different look. And, I think a lot of the younger generation of people that I'm seeing now today too, they don't want to do yard work. They want to hire a lawn company, come cut their grass. They want to go play golf and go play tennis and pickleball and do stuff other than be strapped to their house on the weekends. And I think that's one of the appeal of the smaller lots to a lot of the national builders now, because that's the trend that a lot of people are liking to see. But there's still a large part of the community that still likes those larger lots and doesn't mind the yard work and that sort of thing. So I think if we can figure out a way to incorporate all lot sizes and maybe figure out a way to encourage maybe some smaller houses on some of those lots. By maybe, Mr. Neal mentioned we had approved some things I know back when the PUDs, people would provide us with a minimum square footage that we would hit. They'd say we'd have every house over 2,400. Maybe we need to do that in reverse and create some maximum square footages of 1,200 or 1,400 feet to encourage more affordable housing to be constructed on some of those. But I think if we could get a big mix into these developments, it'll make a better community, because when these 500 lot subdivisions come in, if they go in and put $500,000, $700,000 houses in, they're not going to sell but so many of them per year. And so the developers, they don't want to be there for 10 years. So they want to give different price points a lot of times to make the development go quicker, sell more houses in a year, and, offer more products. But I think if we could find a way to incorporate all those different lot sizes, different housing sizes into a neighborhood, we could make Rolesville a really good place and continue to grow in a good, effective manner.
I agree with you. And one thing that Aaron said that really, really sticks out to me, he said, with all of the price points and the directions that our houses is going, our housing market is going, that in the event of a downturn in the market, we're hurting as a community. So I think that we need to figure out how to get the diversity in there, be it the smaller lot sizes. I think they're desperately needed at this point.
Yeah, I think what hurts us, Mike, is if everybody did what you're saying, it would be great. But when we got some today that is big numbers of houses in there, and they're all on the same little small lot, and there's very little diversity in there. They're called what they call row houses or whatever. You've heard that name, and we got a couple of those neighborhoods that the whole neighborhood is one thing. That's their model. That's what they sell, and they don't have that diversity of lot size. They don't have 50 foots and 60 foots and 70 foots, and you know what I'm saying? So I don't know.
I think hopefully, I think when they come in ask for a rezoning, because most of these areas are residential load, they're coming in. If we can get that as a conditional use zoning district and maybe put some maximums on and sets up some of those lot sizes to kind of force them into building different price points and different size houses.
Because I really think if we go to 5,000 square feet, there is going to be some developers who come in and they're going to want to do 600 units in there at 5,000 square feet. I guarantee you.
Yep. And if we can figure out a way to put some caps on how big some of those houses can be, I think it could get us into that affordable range.
Maybe diversity of lot sizes is a good approach.
Yep. So
You can do 5,000 if,
like 30% of the lots in your community or something like that.
or overall average of
Or the average is this, and you can go down
75
to
or
this
80.
and up to.
I don't know, what do you think, Paul? I mean, you've had a lot of experience. with
Yeah, I think my biggest thought process with the whole looking at all this is Rolesville's pretty big now. We can be picky with what we want, and we just need to figure out if it's a development that comes in, it doesn't benefit the town. There's no reason to look at it. We can be picky with everything that comes through. So why not figure out a way to bring all kind of things into a single division, like when it comes in? I mean, that's just the way it should be.
Yeah.
We have an example of that with the Merritt Farm with, I think, 5 different types of housing. You got townhomes, you got duplexes, you got single-family homes on 40 foot, single-family homes on 50 foot, and single-family homes on 60 foot. So we do have a good variety there. And, I mean, it'll be a couple of years, but that's what we're talking about, you know?
The Point is like that. The Point has single-family townhomes and backloaded homes. The Point is one of the larger developments that really exemplifies what Mike was talking about.
Yeah. So we are, and the developers aren't, you know, they're smart. So they know they need to provide a variety. And, you know, I think we heard the Merritt Farm say that, you know, 4 years from now, they're still going to have homes at the mid 3s. So, you know, that's pretty reasonable considering today's standards. So.
That is all we have for the presentation. One thing that Tanner and I talked about when he was working on all of this was we could see this turning into multiple discussions. It didn't seem to be something we could talk about and stop talking about in one night. So we can certainly, you know, have check-ins or future joint work sessions to continue discussions, and we can talk through text amendments and different topics as well.
Thank you so much, Meredith.
So do you have anything right now, like in the pipeline that's showing diversity right now, or is everything coming in as cookie cutter neighborhood?
Well, this morning we had a meeting with the team who's doing Reserve at Mitchell Mill. That was 5109 Mitchell Mill. That was approved, what, a year or so ago. So that is a split zoning. One side of the street is neighborhood center and the other side is residential medium cluster. And I'm looking at that thinking that was a pretty cool development, or it's going to be a pretty cool development because it'll have 50,000 square feet of commercial space, you know, one box and some smaller inline shops. And it has, you know, townhomes and single family homes with different lot sizes.
Okay.
So I was looking at that this morning going, I think this is going to be really nice.
Okay. Awesome.
And we'll see more of that as we go forward because it makes sense.
So what else you have?
That's all. That is all we have.
I was thinking it had something to do with building heights.
That will be at the December 3rd town board meeting for a legislative hearing. If you want me to just briefly touch on that, I know we took a look at that at the September 17th work session, and that presentation really did not go well. I think it was missing.
I was thinking, because I know what they was talking about on building heights, and I know what the board was talking about on building heights. And I really think this is an opportunity that we could talk together.
Sure.
Kind of get an understanding.
Right, because you're right, got completely different feedback from the planning board and the town board. The planning board really seemed to be positive about the building height text amendment because they said they liked the variety or more of the transition of height, because so many of it's like our height is either 35 feet or it's 60 feet. And adding some spots or adding standards in districts where you could go, 40, 45, 50, and have a range of building height to match the intensity of the district. I think the planning board thought that was good. And we started with suggesting a height of 60 feet in general commercial, and then you all were not comfortable with that. And I plan to change that text amendment proposal for what I'm bringing to you on December 3rd. One of the big reasons for the text amendment is for Pine Glow or Glow on Main. That project is getting closer to approval with the site development plan, and their site development plan can't get approved unless the building heights increase, because they need to go somewhere in the 40 to 45 foot range.
They're putting an ice ring in there.
Yeah, they're doing like a half-size hockey rink in there and some other things.
3 stories? They're proposing 3 stories for that?
I think it's just 2. It's just 2, but some higher ceilings based on the use.
I think my understanding was they're going with 2 because they didn't think they could get 3. So I think they're going with 2 is my understanding. But if they went with 3, they may have an upstairs walking thing or something, but I don't know what's the latest. But that's kind of what I heard. They didn't think they.
Sure.
Because that would take 60, wouldn't it?
From talking to Robert Shar, it sounded like the 40 to 45 would work for what they're doing now and what they have in their current plan set.
Which is a 2, I think.
Yeah. And I know we took a look at the medical office building, or it seems more like dental office at the corner of Redford Place Drive and Main Street. That one's about 50 feet high, and that was approved under the Unified Development Ordinance. So that gives you something to look at, to think about, is that reasonable or not? So
I think I caused the most issue on that, so.
So what, Paul?
I think I caused the most issue on that one. And I think my issue with it, I'm trying to think back what it was now. The issue with it was giving a whole area a blanket of just, you could build whatever you want up to 60 feet. And that was my thought process was, it depends on how things get built and what sequence and everything else. So like, I think I'd rather see piece by piece as it comes in, how they work together versus saying everybody in this area can build at 60 foot. I just don't need a mini Raleigh here. Like it just doesn't, that's what I get worried about, because it should make sense. You should be able to look at it and see that it makes sense before you are allowed. Because if you give them that opportunity, they're gonna go there. I mean, that's the thing I was concerned about with it.
For purposes of discussion, would that be addressed by expanding the TC alternative design requirement to the general commercial district? We currently have a provision to go higher in the TC district by bringing it to the board under an evidentiary hearing. But that is only in the TC district. That language could be copied to the general commercial district.
Well, what if, that's a good idea. What if instead of having a height in these commercial districts, they have to have it part of the condition that the board approves? The condition will be maximum 45 feet, maximum 50 feet, maximum 60 feet. That would be more like what he's talking about. Depends on if you got a 1-story house beside it or something, So is that, can you do that?
So the only challenge with that is that a condition makes it more restrictive, not less restrictive. So a condition isn't a waiver of the ordinance, it's a tightening of the ordinance. And we certainly didn't want to set it at, we could set general commercial at 60 feet, and then the risk would only be for those areas that are currently zoned general commercial, right? Because now they can go to 60 feet. But for anything that was seeking general commercial, it would be the will of the board as to whether to approve any of those that actually came forward without a restriction and was seeking to take their full by right 60 feet.
We don't have many as commercial now, except for that, and then there's some down at Hampton Point
Right,
and all,
aren't many.
some down there, I think.
So the risk isn't very great.
One more spot on Rogers Road, across from the daycare.
Is that commercial?
I believe it is.
I think it is. I think
I think
that,
so.
The vacant lot.
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's where CrossFit was going. I think that's commercial too. So it is a few.
Mm-hmm.
You can also add and subtract zoning districts. So you could have a zoning district for recreational commercial uses.
What
that
if,
just happens to be for half-size skating rinks.
I don't know. I mean, kind of like what Paul's saying, if we could figure out how to make it work.
Almost like a variance to expand the offering rather than restrict it, like our town attorney's saying.
What is the food lot? I mean, what is the Publix going to be? I mean, that's a pretty tall building.
It does look pretty tall. I'd have to look at the elevations to
Because,
get
you
my head on
know, I was thinking about that. I mean, that's in a regular commercial thing. But we may have done that before we went to the LDO. I can't remember.
that. We reviewed the Publix under the LDO. With Publix in
Okay.
those lots, we did review it under the LDO.
Because I would think that's more than 35 feet, but it may not be, but that's,
I'm not sure.
See if I can-
huh?
About 50 feet, I think.
Publix?
Yeah.
The new Publix? So how did they get through then if we're restricting it to 30?
We ca- I'm gonna
'Cause
see.
that means anything we try to do with the Target, anything, it's not going to, we're not going to be able to do it.
No, we're not really clear on that. I think we do the average, we interpret it as the average, so that maybe those pieces don't count.
I don't think they got a TC zone, and they may have. I don't
Yeah.
think they did.
Yeah, I'm gonna peek real quick and see what it is, because I don't remember. Okay.
No, I'm saying it's probably the parapet wall. It's not a 50-foot building.
Oh, you don't think the roof of the building is?
Yeah.
The question was whether it's parapet wall that's
parapet.
over the 35 feet.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So you don't think the roof is more than 35 feet?
I don't think,
Don't think so?
actually, I'm very fortunate. The assistant planning director just texted me and I can see it on my watch. And
Well, he should
I
know.
love that he's watching.
he said, it is about 35 feet and parapets don't count.
Okay.
Or he should know. So they got that in.
Yeah, you guys are right.
But then they put a fake thing over 35 feet, right? So,
And I'm not looking to make it more restrictive for people. I mean, we obviously want stuff to be built here that's we want and everything else, but just at the same time, I just worry about giving a blanket approval
We
for
should have
everything.
final say
Yeah.
Bottom line.
on a case-by-case
Right.
basis.
Especially since we have so little land left.
Right.
Bottom.
So with the example of Glow on Main or Pine Glow, would you be comfortable going to right now the maximum height in general commercial is 35 feet. Would you be comfortable to changing that to 40 feet? And if you go over that, you'd have to come to the board? Or is anything over 35 feet?
So 40 feet is what?
35
Looking
feet
for.
is the maximum right
No,
now.
40 feet's what he's looking for.
He's looking for somewhere in the range of 40 to 45. He told me before he thought 40 would be okay, but I'm confirming with him.
I mean, I guess it depends on location too. What's on your either side? I mean,
Nothing.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like this, so.
Right.
So if the board,
that's the
were
thing, yeah.
to adopt the same structure you have now in the TC district, which allows applicants to go higher than the by right, there are a set of criteria, if I remember right, and the board determines whether those are met.
Right. Yep.
So it's not a legislative choice. If the applicant can show by their evidence that they qualify for the higher height, then they get it. But they don't get it just
Right.
because they want it.
Right.
I think watching you guys, y'all was okay with the 60, I think. Anybody want to talk about that, why you felt good about the 60?
I just felt like, it was with the limited area we have in Roseville to develop commercial downtown, up was a good way to go, because we need more commercial development downtown. And I mean, I like Mr. Neal's approach of adopting that same standards that we have for the town center, because that gives the commissioners the opportunity to look at each one on a case by case. And like you said, Glow on Main might be one that's, a convenience store, and then, a coffee shop and a auto parts store further away. So it's not really going to like impact any residential. And that might be one that's more approvable as a higher height, where if you take one somewhere else, it might be some closer by residential houses or something, you might not want to grant it for them. But I like the approach of the town center. I think it gives the commissioners a lot of opportunity to really review it and look at it on a case-by-case basis.
We just have to look at the definition of town center, because concern for high-density residential may not work on Main Street.
I also think a higher limit also opens the opportunity for parking garages and other kinds of alternatives that will utilize the space, to his point, a lot more efficiently. It's particularly in the downtown corridor area. So that gives a more likelihood, or at least more flexibility in offering that type of structure as well.
Thank you.
The board could address something like that with a design consideration for measuring height. So single-story parking garage is just not counted for measuring height. It saves you from having a hearing.
You can do a 9-story parking garage over there.
Well, I notice I said a single story, because you can certainly imagine someone going wild.
Are you feel okay? We can proceed with this, or where are you at? You said you're coming back
Coming
December
3rd.
Okay.
For a legislative hearing, and I'm not sure,
Is that for the whole thing? What is
for
that?
the building, just for the building height text amendment. 'Cause it's
Just
already-
for the text amendment?
It's just the building height text amendment, so I want to make sure I'm bringing something forward to you all that's good and accurate. And I'm not sure I got an answer or heard an answer to are you comfortable with going to 40 feet in general commercial, or do you want to leave it at 35? I think what our attorney suggested with copying what we do in town center to allow someone to come to you all for a design alternative would be a good idea. Seems like it makes sense, and we already have language for it. So that is great. I'm just curious, because I want to be able to prepare the text amendment well.
And I think what I've heard is that we want to be able to consider that without giving blanket approval for anyone coming in at 40 feet.
Okay.
So we got to have discretion, not saying no on 40 feet, just that we want the ability to say yes or no on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so let's say that's what's in the text amendment on December 3rd, and it gets,
Well, we're going to go case by case. Why it's not something higher than 40? Why are we going to cap it at 45 if it's case by case?
sure. So if that text amendment gets approved if adding that language, like is in the town center, and that gets approved on December 3rd, would Mr. Shar be able to, at that same meeting, bring his height request to you all, or would that have to wait a meeting?
You can bring it. I think you can bring it.
We would just have to do ours first, right? And then he could
Right.
bring it.
Right. Could be effective
Oh,
immediately.
the design alternative does? I thought it was just the design alternative? Okay, okay, so no, he can't do that, because his group is bringing forward an alternative parking plan for that same project on December 3rd.
Okay. So you had a good point, you think, or?
Yes, I have clarity, thank you.
Because one of the things I want to, as you know, I said this, we want to get to a point that she's not coming back everything and saying, if it needs to be 35, let's leave it at 35. If we can do 45 or 50, that could save you in the future. Whatever, we just don't need to be coming back, constantly coming back, asking for more, a change.
Sure.
And I don't know what we're limiting at 40. you know, can we do what can we, I guess we can't do the dental place again, because that's 52, I think somebody said.
Right.
I guess the school is exempt, I don't know, but they way over that, even the elementary school. So, so I don't know what we're limiting, you know, in other words, kind of look at what we may get in the future.
Mhm.
You know, we get some kind of sporting thing. I went last night, we went over to Morrisville, and they have this go-kart. I don't know if y'all ever been to a go-kart track or not, but they have these go-kart tracks, and they go up, you know, second story and all. And I don't know what the height of that thing is, but it's pretty high. You know, it's pretty high building. We would never be able to do that unless you come back and say, we want to get this go-kart place in here. So, you know, and I'm sure there's other things coming. So let's make a good decision on what it needs to be.
But we're talking about the general commercial district, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is limited places in town, right?
Well, it's limited zoning now, but it's a lot of places in our comprehensive land use plan, we just have not zoned to commercial. Like Dave said,
Right.
whenever it comes for zoning, then you got more control over it. Right, Dave? I think that's what you're saying.
Correct. It'll come forward for a legislative
Yes.
choice.
Yeah. So we got some that's in the comprehensive land use plan that says this is a commercial section that we just have never zoned commercial.
How high is 2 stories? Is that the 35?
20 to 25 feet.
Really?
A telephone pole is 35, 36 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, 35 feet is a challenge for some commercial uses because of HVAC on the roof. And that comes down to how your LDO measures height. Some communities count the parapet wall, some do not. Some count the HVAC on the roof, some don't count it if it's screened. And all of that comes from those town and city councils struggling with the same thing you are.
We'll figure this out next meeting then, but you
Okay.
got enough to work with right now? Final thoughts from our planning group. Thank y'all for coming. Any final thoughts from the board?
Good meeting.
Great meeting.
Murder? As you see, our town manager is not with us. He had a family/personal thing he had to do tonight. So we got a fill-in for Eric. She still sits behind his name there. It says
All
Eric. But thank you for filling in tonight, Meredith. Appreciate you doing a great job. And come up. Glad to hear from you.
Mr. Mayor and members of the town board, my name is Frank Pierce, and I'm going to change the subject matter a little bit now. I've been hearing through the grapevine that our Main Street project won't be completed in 4 to 5 months. Is that true?
You talking about the whole project?
Well, uptown at the intersection.
Yeah, I wish Eric was here. He could give us update. I think the update came out today. Did it not? I think. My understanding, Frank, the holdup is the water lines, and you know more about water lines than anybody in town probably, because you may have put those in, I'm not sure. But Raleigh's got to replace the water lines. I think what he put out today in the press release was what?
Spring, summer 25.
Summer 2025.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
So we're looking 4 to 6 months, basically, right?
Essentially.
Possibly, yeah.
Yes, sir.
My point is this. I'm going to ask for y'all's support in whatever way you can. Let's get this fire department temporary access to the main street. that can be done very simply with just a stop sign. And if it comes down to moving the barricades or the barrels, when they have a call, they can do that. But it would help eliminate this having to go through per circle
Okay,
every time we have a fire call.
okay. Thank you, Frank. Yeah, let's talk to Eric about that, Donnie.
Yeah, we're accessing Williams and Pulley Street now, back out on the sort of Boyd and Perry Street.
Yeah. We'll talk about
I know they're working that area and having to dig it up and pour concrete and put in curb and gutter right now. So hopefully sometime after the first of the year, maybe we can look at that.
Okay. Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, where we at? I think, hey, Christina, you got anything you want to close with? Everything good? All right. I think that's it then, guys. Appreciate it. Unless there's opposition, we're going to adjourn. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for
Thank
coming.
you.
Appreciate that.
Opposition, right?
Huh?
I have opposition.
Go right ahead.